What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the You Know Ball podcast. I am your host, Tro Bro Dude, and it is All-Star Weekend. It has concluded after a horrible All-Star game, and we will get to that in a little bit. But before we talk about that, I want to talk about our sponsors, Underdog Fantasy, the newest and best place to play fantasy sports and win big prizes. So right now, you can sign up for Underdog using our promo code SLOP. That's SLOP. To get a $100 deposit match bonus all throughout the NBA season. You can use their pick'em on any given night. I was actually in Kentucky this past weekend, so I was able to do a pick'em for the first time, and I was happy to tell you that it lost. So we're doing well here, but you can win up to 20 times your money. I just want to say, total Mickey Mouse loss on this tickets for the Underdog pick'em. Giannis got hurt in the first quarter of the game. So I feel as though it would have hit if Giannis didn't get hurt. But Giannis hurt his wrist, sat out the rest of that Bulls game. But you can win up to 20 times your money on any given night. Use our promo code SLOP. Go on there, sign up, do the pick'em, do the fantasy draft that they offer every single night. You can play against your friends. You can play against the public. And you can win a lot of money on Underdog this NBA season. Then we'll be doing stuff throughout the rest of the regular season with You Know Ball listeners up through the playoffs. So, Sam, we thought slop season was over. Mm-hmm. We thought, you know what? All these trades, Kevin Durant gets moved, Kyrie Irving, all these crazy trades happen at the deadline. Mm-hmm. And the slop gods just keep dropping slop. We just keep getting fresh slop. I was to the point with Russell Westbrook where I really thought he would have either just sat out the season because like all the news we were hearing was teams that want him are like the Bulls and the Wizards and like play-in teams. And I just figured if those are the teams that put offers on the table for him to come play and have a real role on the team, that he might just say, you know what, I'm just going to sit it out. And then I'll test free agency in the summer and see if I can come back next year. But the Los Angeles Clippers, who are really low-key kind of addicted to slop, they at every single deadline, they make moves. They made 3 trades at the deadline. They follow it up, signing Russell Westbrook today for the rest of the season. So what do you think about that? I think I know what you think, but what do you think about this move by the Clippers?
It's another chapter in the John Wall, Russell Westbrook, Spider-Man meme. It's two guys who have had very similar careers. Like the difference is John Wall got hurt and Russ didn't. So I guess Russ was like a little bit better, but like, I don't know. If John Wall had the MVP consent factory machine that Sam Presti built for Russell Westbrook, I think we might have
pulling the strings.
The consent manufacturing OKC team. He might have done it. I mean, I think I know Sixers fans love Ryan Bernardoni Danger Cart, but I think he said it best when he said, "Look, as long as Russ either doesn't play or it changes entirely how he plays, which he hasn't done literally his entire career, it should be fine."
Yeah, we only have 15 years of sample size to say that Russ will not change his game no matter what.
Who's to say? I mean, this is probably it then, right? Like he's definitely going to change now. And somebody pointed out it is like eerie, like how his stats are like extremely similar to like John Wall's.
They're like, basically the same, except Russ is probably better on defense.
Exactly. That's like pretty much it. So, feels pretty desperate. Really bad. Pretty minimal upside, a lot of downside actually. Just in terms of like fucking the team up. So, I don't know. Maybe Tyronn Lue's like established enough, feels comfortable enough to like just like bench a guy like this, but like I don't know, anytime you put an MVP on your bench and he's like a guy who like literally can't play rotation minutes, and like the way that he's gonna like help the team out is like being like a spot minute certain matchups guy. I don't know, man, like that's tough. Like that's a really hard thing to do. Like Blake Griffin did that. Not a lot of other guys have managed that. Like Vince Carter has managed that. I'm trying to think of who are other like super duper stars who have like
like guys who have won MVPs, it's like pretty much none of them, right?
Yeah,
like I mean, even as good as Blake Griffin. Blake Griffin did finish top 5 in MVP one season. He was one of the top 5 or 10 best players in the NBA for a year or two. Guys that you're describing, Vince Carter was a very good player, but the large majority of guys that are this late into their careers never really change their game because they don't feel like they have to. We've talked about this, and there's someone that when we get to the All-Star draft, we'll talk about that was exactly like this in their career. But it feels as though, I don't know, there's this perception that Russ was a different player with the Lakers when in reality he just came off the bench towards the end, and he was still, if you watch the games, he definitely tried more on defense this year, but he's still going to take a bunch of bad shots. He's still going to be, a ball-dominant player overall, and when he doesn't have the ball, there's not a ton of effectiveness with him, and that was why he clashed a little bit with LeBron James and Anthony Davis. Well, I feel as though it's going to be a very similar problem with the Clippers, and my thought on this, just from the Clippers' perspective, was, how the Lakers kind of sunk this window with LeBron and AD because they've been so dedicated to finding a second ball handler for LeBron. Originally it was, we got to trade Danny Green for Dennis Schroeder. We got to bring Rondo back. We got to trade for Russ. All of this just completely sunk that, basically closed that window. They might even be doing it again with D'Angelo Russell, to be honest. The Clippers version of that is, we need a point guard. We need a point guard who's just, which is one of my biggest criticisms of team building in the NBA, is that not everything magically goes away when you just have a point guard. If you have Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, why do you not want those two running your offense? When those two are on the court, the Clippers offense is totally fine. It's when they're injured and they're out of the rotation, which by the way is a lot, where the team sucks on offense and is one of the worst offenses in the NBA. So if you're worried about that, this has to be a signing. If it's going to work out in any capacity, it has to be a signing where there is a deal where Russ will get benched in the playoffs. And I just don't believe that he would ever agree to that. So I very much think that it's a terrible move by the Clippers, mostly because obviously we have a large sample of Russ not changing. Obviously we have a large sample of teams trying to figure out a way around some of the flaws within his game, especially as he ages. But more importantly to me is that it's going to hurt guys that you just acquired.
Yeah.
Eric Gordon is definitely going to play less minutes now. Bones Highland, I don't think Bones is ready to be in a real contenders rotation anyway for the playoffs, but he's definitely not even going to be in the rotation at all anymore. You just traded for him. Maybe that was more of a long-term move.
How about fucking Terrence Mann, dude? He's probably going to have fewer minutes than he already, he had to fight tooth and nail to get into, loose rotation in the first time. This is what I'm saying. You have to be, just willing to just give him DNP CDs. And I'm sure that was, not part of the discussion when they agreed to sign him.
Yeah.
So, it'd be one thing if they, actually used him as, a spot minutes, certain matchups guy. But I bet that's not what Russ told his agent. I bet he told him this, here's how I want to play. I would prefer to stay here in LA and play for a contender, and not have to move. That'd be great. But I'm pretty sure they made concessions with him on playing time and stuff. And they might be cooked, man. I was holding out hope that they were going to kind of flick the switch. I've been a little higher on the Clippers than you, but not really. I've also been trending down as the season went along, and they might this might be the nail in the coffin. They might not be coming out of the West at all.
So I think the last 2 weeks that's been the podcast cycle discussion, right?
Yeah.
Kawhi looks kind of back, and when Paul George and Kawhi, look at the numbers when those two play and the on and offs I just brought up. But I already felt as though they might have run into some issues, and I hate to use a Bill Simmons cliche, but the too many guys thing was real with the Clippers. And I say that because, some guys might be okay with not playing. You know who I think is not going to be okay with not playing? Bones Highland.
Yeah. Yep.
He literally just left the team due to some issues that he had with the coach, with other teammates.
Yeah.
I think some of that was over his playing time and his playing style.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's going to go poorly. I think that guy, like I said, you just acquired Eric Gordon. I think he thought he was going to have a big role here. Now, he's a veteran guy. He might be more willing to suck it up and whatever and just say, okay. But, like, you're affecting essentially all of your guard rotation with this one move.
Yeah.
And I'm actually pulling for Russ. I hope that I really do hope that he can go to the Clippers, find a role for him, even if it is what you described as like a guy who like can be like a spot minute player, can come in off the bench, provide some energy, get some rim pressure and playmaking, try on defense at the very least, and kind of inject some energy into a team that honestly, it was when the Sixers got Montrezl Harrell and when we started playing him, I was like, this is never going to work. Like, Montrez is not even in his prime, quote unquote. He was not a player who could play in the playoffs. He had flaws, but the one thing that a guy like Montrez gives you is that if there's a Tuesday night game in Charlotte or there is a game where he's going to try harder than anyone else in the court. Yeah. And the one thing you can't knock Russell Westbrook for is that he does really try.
Really hard,
His motor is still crazy, and he's going to give you 100% on any given night when you're playing, even if it's just a meaningless game against, the Pistons who have like 15 wins.
Yeah.
So that maybe be the one saving grace here is that maybe they want to save these guys for the playoffs, but like they've already been resting so much. And now you have more, like you already were trying to integrate two or three new players with Bones, Plumlee, who, by the way, Plumlee and Zubac are both non-shooting centers, which presents its own issue with Russ. Now, maybe in some 5-out lineups he could work, but I thought the point of acquiring Mason Plumlee was to go away from that. Was to have a different look that you could always have a normal backup center, and actually was really working before the All-Star break. Was like, I think they were 3-0 in the games that they got since they acquired these new guys. So my whole thing on this is that like you're now having to integrate a player who has been always hard to fit into teams, and now you got to figure that out on the fly. I'm rooting for him because I don't think there's anything possibly funnier than a Clippers first round matchup where
that would be amazing.
Like, I don't think the Lakers can get high as the 7th seed, but if it was the 2-7, that would be amazing if they played and the Clippers just stomped them with Russ.
It might be 7-8 or 8-9.
Oh, you mean in the play-in?
It might be in the play-in.
No, I think the Clippers are the 4 seed.
Yeah, but like, aren't they like only like 3 games up on like 9 or something like that? Like,
it's not a ton.
Even less, yeah.
Right now, the Clippers are 33-28, and the 9 seed is 29-29. So yeah, you could 3 or 4 games changes that. So they're right now currently 1-2. They're technically 2.5 games up on the 9 seed. So this all can change, but I would very much like to see. Lakers Clippers, and I'm rooting for Russ. It sucks that his career has become the way that it has. Part of it is his own stubbornness. Part of it is that's kind of what he, as people say, like the reason why Russ is still in the league is because the reason why Russ was in the league in the first place. Because of his just insane motor and never turns it off, all that shit. But like
tenacious, like,
at a certain point in your career, you have to adjust your game. And unless they think that Ty Lue can make him do what we were joking about with Eric Spoelstra, making him into Super Bruce Brown when he was in that Nets role, then I just don't really see a viable way for this to really work.
I mean, that's the thing is it's just like, it seems like the Clippers are kind of, that seems to be their team building philosophy is just like, be ready like with a huge deep bench of guys so you can literally adapt to any play style like and match up like opponent wise, but I just don't think just teams don't really work that way. Like you kind of have to have, look, it's even happening to the fucking Celtics. Like Peyton Pritchard is pissed, like, and like he's not even he's not anything, but like the fact that he can't get into games because they're so deep in their rotation, like he can't play, and that's like he's like asking out. Like Grant Williams is talking about how much money he's going to make. Like you can't have that. Like, and I don't know. I'm starting to be out on the Clippers. This is I don't think it's going to go well.
I'm just confused because it felt like their main strength was depth. So why did they need this? It's like other than this idea that everyone has created that every team needs like a nominal point guard still, for some reason, even though like there are plenty of teams that get away with not having like a normal point guard. Like the Celtics. The Celtics don't have a normal point guard. The Celtics are built around wings, and like they have a guy like Marcus Smart who can play on the ball, off the ball. They have Malcolm Brogdon who can come off the bench and create some of his own offense, but he's largely a spot-up guy. Like, there are ways around having a normal, just like regular-ass point guard. Like, the Bucks don't have a regular point guard. Drew's more of a combo guard. He can play point guard, but like I just don't really understand this idea that you need a point guard and why Russell Westbrook you feel as though it was John Wall before, and I remember going on the podcast and being like, I hate this move for the Clippers. It makes no sense to me. Why are you using your MLE on a position that is going to require touches, is not going to be effective off the ball, is going to create its own issues, and they're doing it again. Like, it's wild to me that anyone thinks – I don't even think that you can really find many people who think this is going to work. Because, like, I'm looking at, like, their roster right now and, like, okay, let's just run down like in their regular rotation. Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, Zubac, Terrence Mann, Marcus Morris, Robert Covington, who's on the fringes of the rotation, if not out of it. Amir Coffey, who's out of the rotation. Nicholas Batum, Eric Gordon, Bones Highland, Mason Plumlee. I just named 11 players without getting to Russell Westbrook that would be in the large majority of NBA rotations.
Yeah. Yep.
And now you're adding another guy in there. Now, look, maybe the agreement, and once again, we don't know what the agreement is, but if the agreement is there are certain matchups where there might just be nights in the playoffs or in the regular season where we just don't have shit and we need to have a guy. And like, this is your best chance at rehabbing your career and getting a ring potentially. And that's why Russ agreed to it. And also you don't have to move, by the way, which honestly is probably a big part of it. But like, I don't know, like how many times do we have to do this before we just realize that like, it's probably not going to work on any team that isn't like the Wizards, basically.
Well, and like, so what I can think though is it's like, was it literally just like Paul George was like, oh yeah, I like playing with Russ. Go, yeah. I'd like for him to come hang out. Like,
to be fair, last time he did that with Reggie Jackson, it actually worked. And everyone was out on Reggie Jackson at the time, at least.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I do think Ty Lue is like, I know people are kind of out on Ty Lue this year, but like, I still think he's like a really good NBA head coach. So like I'm willing to give him like the benefit of the doubt, but like, I don't know, man. We've seen it so many times. Like it seems like a bad bet. You know, like, that's all I'll say. Like, I'll let KOC be the one who keeps saying that, like, this is going to be the time that Russ learns to like off-ball screen and do.
I think I think even he's over it.
Yeah.
If KOC's out on it, then I just don't know who could possibly be in on it. If that makes any sense.
No one.
It's crazy, but once again, rooting for Russ. But I just don't. I don't see a way that this ends. It was in your building. You saw it in your building.
Yeah. I just, I kind of was hoping, Russ, you see, a guy, they're making a commitment to him. They wanted him to be part of a big three. They paid him a huge contract. Like, I just wish teams would do that more for their players and not have it end in a gross buyout. Like, I think like, for example, what the Cavs did with Kevin. Oh, well, yeah. That was weird, right?
That's the next thing we're going to talk about, which is somehow very weird. Both UCLA teammates from the 2008 draft, top 5, potential future Hall of Famers. Russ is definitely a future Hall of Famer. Kevin Love, maybe borderline guy.
Yeah.
Very, very strange situation, especially playing with also both having played big roles on LeBron's teams. Big three, as you said.
Yeah.
The Kevin Love situation is really strange to me because a year ago, not even a full calendar year ago, like last April, we were like, Kevin Love is the sixth man of the year potentially. Like he came in second to Tyler Hero, was seemingly having a revived career with the Cavs in this new role off the bench as a shooter, as a guy who's going to come and get rebounds, whatever, play as that third big with Mobley and Allen, and kind of be a perfect fit in between the two because of the things that he can bring offensively. And now we're here less than a year later, and he gets bought out by the team. It was weird because it was like he's going to get bought out and the Heat are probably going to sign him. And then all of a sudden we hear like the Cavs don't want to buy him out because he's going to go to an Eastern Conference team potentially. And everyone's like, okay, well, you don't have any control over that. You're buying the guy out. He could just go wherever he wants. Like, what are you going to offer him less? Or you're going to offer him more money in the buyout if he goes to like the Suns or someone in the Western Conference or the Warriors? Like, it didn't make any sense to me. And then we wait a day or two, and then we hear, okay, no, they're going through with the buyout, and he's going to sign with the Heat, and he's going to meet with the Sixers. And my first thought was, why are the Cavs even doing this?
Like, it's so weird. Like he's not like a great player anymore, but he's like a player. He's like a rotation guy. Like you said, he was second and sixth man of the year. Like he's like a pretty solid rotation player. He's just like turned himself into a great stretch big. He can still rebound the ball. Like, you know, he's defensively, he is a long ways from that 2016 defense on Steph Curry, but like he can still like, I don't know, he can still kind of hoop, and it just seems like, you know, there was like Kevin Love was on all those bad Cavs teams, and you didn't trade him. He used to be John Collins, like with like everyone thought he was going to be traded like every year because you signed him to that insane extension, and then he was immediately unhappy. Yep. So you just kind of kept him around the whole time, and now things are finally good, and you like buy him out. It's so weird to me. Like
it sounds like they wanted to do good by him because of the fact that he was, you know, won a title with the team, has been on the team the longest of any player currently. They probably have a good relationship. They want to do good by him, and he falls out of the rotation, which it seemed like at the beginning of the year he was fine. Then he gets injured and he can't shoot. And like that is his main offensive utility as a big, because the defense is pretty bad from everything I've seen, from everything I heard. You know, he can't really defend as a five in a way that you would want, and he's too slow to guard fours and all that stuff. Yeah. But you're worried about him going to another team when, like, who is their third big? Robin Lopez?
Yeah, it's Robin Lopez.
Yeah, like I watched the Sixers and the Cavs play the other night, and they just played one of Mobley or Allen the entire time. Like they that was their 4-5, and like they didn't have any sort of other bigs in their entire rotation. And like it seems like every team nowadays has two or three, like I would say three bigs. Like the Celtics just traded for Mike Muscala at the deadline to be their third big. Mm-hmm. It seems like every team, the Bucks have Bobby Portis. Like it seems like every team wants that third big. Why don't you just put him in your rotation? Like, he can't be that actively harmful. And now we're looking at a situation where, like, I know Sixers fans were pissed because they all wanted him. I was a little bit skeptical on the fit on the Sixers, mainly because the Sixers already play so many defensive liabilities. Mm-hmm. They already play Maxey a ton, Harden, who's iffy on defense. They play, off the bench, Shake Milton is in the rotation. They really don't have any on-ball stopper type guys. They're mainly all off-ball guys. You know, PJ and Tobias can sometimes get away with that. But, like, really where Kevin Love would fit in the Sixers rotation wasn't exactly clear to me. I don't really think you could play him at the 5 unless you put Paul Reed at the 4 and essentially kind of just hope that that's good enough and put Jaden McDaniels at the 3. And when you're running your weird all bench lineups or whatever, I didn't think with the Sixers' point of attack defense, a Kevin Love signing would make any sense.
Yeah. I mean,
I think offensively he could provide some if he could shoot still.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That's what I was just going to say. I mean, he's still like a 35, like even with him being like quote unquote, like awful, he's like still a 35% 3-point shooter this year, you know, like, so, you know, I mean, he's overall, I think like high 30s in field goal percentage, but which is not what you want. But I know that the Heat are going to get their mitts on him. He's going to get hooked up to the adrenochrome machine, like, and
yeah, HGH Kevin Love. It's going to hit different.
Yeah, he's going to be, I mean, because that was like kind of their point of weakness. Like he might start for them, you know?
Okay. So that's what I wanted to talk about.
Yeah.
Because this is why I only wanted the Sixers to get him so that the Heat didn't get him.
Yeah.
And maybe I'm going to, and I know Bill Simmons said the same thing, maybe I'm going to Bill-brained here, but I look at that team and I go, okay, so every single spot in the rotation is a positive defender right now. Like basically everyone that you have in your rotation, Jimmy, Bam, Oladipo, it's really just Tyler Hero, and even he's somewhat improved on that end this season.
Yeah.
So it's really just Tyler Hero, who you can just split up their minutes so they're not playing together all that much. Yeah. And then you basically, the biggest issue for them has been play at the 4 and a guy who can do, I mean, look, Kevin Love's a different player than PJ Tucker, but a guy who can shoot and rebound. And like that is what Kevin Love is going to do for them. Yeah. And the main thing is, yes, the defense might be an issue, but if you're putting Jimmy, Bam, like name a random rotate, Gabe Vincent, they're all positive defenders. Max Strus and Tyler Hero might be the only ones. And Strus is even a better defender than I think that people give him credit for. I actually think he's, and a main reason why he's replaced Duncan Robinson in their rotation is because his defense. Highsmith is a defensive first guy. He's been playing a lot for them. Like they're essentially now just adding one defensive weakness guy. That's like a true negative defender who actually rebounds the hell out of the ball, which, and they're like the worst 3-point shooting team in the NBA. So it can't hurt to have another 3-point shooting option in Love. Like, I think that this signing, we talked about last time, if you rank the buyout guys, because we talked about the buyout history and how it's actually not that fruitful for the teams that sign these guys. I would put Love number 1 in terms of having a role and an effectiveness on a real playoff team. Maybe the Heat don't go deep, but like it's possible they face the Sixers or the Cavs in the first round and give them some problems.
Yeah.
And I don't know if he's going to start just because I think that the hero Love fit defensively because they really build themselves on the defensive identity thing. Like that's like their thing. Like they were benching offensive guys like Duncan Robinson last year to play more defensive first guys because they realize that's really what their bread and butter is, and that's they go rat mode and they can lock teams up. But at the very worst, Love gives you a great bench big option that is just going to give you another look. And if there's anyone that can figure out a way to cover up the defensive weaknesses, it's Spo.
It's Spo, yeah. He's the best coach in the NBA. Like, I don't think it's people always say Pop, but it like hasn't been Pop for like 5 years. It's Spo. Yeah, like
100%.
Spo. Yeah. It's gonna be. It's look, man. I mean, like, I actually think the good Martin twin that's on Miami. I forget which one it is. He's actually like pretty, he's like pretty solid. But like, so he's not like terrible. But I think it just gives them, to your point, another like look to throw out, and that's like what the playoffs are all about, is like adapting looks, you know what I'm saying, like, and having guys in your toolbox that you can try for different matchups to like figure out which one's going to be the key. And something like that, it just gives them it makes them a little bit more flexible and a little bit more dangerous, because Jimmy is he is the alpha. He's got the biggest balls in the room, and he is like gonna go toe to toe with anyone in a playoff matchup. So the Heat are a little dangerous now.
He'll score 13 for 3 straight games, and no one will talk about it. But then he'll have 45 in the game to hold off elimination, and it will be playoff Jimmy's back. So that's what happens every year. Is that it's like, oh, he's injured, and I don't know if he's the same guy, and then he scores 45 points in Game 6, and you're like, how does he keep getting away with it?
Dude, he fucking did it to us when the Heat beat us that first time this year. He just he was like dog shit. Like he was like averaging like 9 points a game, and then just had like just back to back like dagger threes, just killed us in overtime.
It was incredible.
Yeah,
he's ridiculous.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Like I kind of look at this as, if any of the buyout guys can work, I think I had Reggie Jackson and as my number 1 guy. I think I'd put Kevin Love above him just because, and this has been my big thing. When we looked at the history of the buyout guys on the last episode, they were all guys that at one point in their career were really good.
Yeah.
Peja Stojakovic, Blake Griffin, guys that were making all-star teams, guys that were like key contributors to contending teams. Yeah. And Kevin Love is the only guy that's still, of everyone that's available, it's him and Russ. And Russ, as we just discussed, has all of these issues fitting into teams at this point in his career that I don't really envision Kevin Love having. So, like,
he changed his game on the fly for Cleveland, for the Cleveland teams. That was
both times. Two different iterations of the Cavs that he was different for. So, like, I think that
fit out.
He basically just became a spot up 3-point shooter. Like that was like that became his job, and like a ball mover. And that's what I think he's going to do for this Heat team. And I don't know, maybe it's just because of the way that they have flipped the switch in the playoffs before, but I've gone from thinking the Cavs are just going to like dog walk them in the first round if they play to like, I actually could see this. The Bucks are giving Meyers Leonard a 10-day contract.
Let's go! Huge!
Speaking of Miami Heat big men.
Let's go!
No way. Why?
That's so funny. Let's go.
Jesus Christ. Wait, what? Does that mean... So, I don't know if you saw this. Was this fake? With, okay. Okay, here's the Woj tweet.
Yeah.
Meyers Leonard, out of the NBA since March 2021, after uttering an anti-Semitic slur on a video game live stream and rehabbing post-surgical nerve damage on his right leg.
Two things.
Yeah, it was really the leg injury that held him back. Is signing
he's back. Oh God, that's so funny.
Question: there was a thing, and I don't know if it was real because the tweet got deleted, but it was Windhorst talking about an injury that could affect the Eastern Conference race. And everyone was like, is the Giannis wrist injury more serious than we thought? Because he did obviously play in that All-Star game.
Yeah.
With, but he only came in for one play. And he basically kind of, like, he immediately subbed out, and now they're signing a big. What's going on in Milwaukee?
What's going on in Milwaukee?
I mean, maybe it's just for depth purposes because they had an empty roster spot and they were just like, "Fuck it, let's sign a good locker room guy." Back to less problematic Meyers Leonard here.
Here at Uniball, we are not choosing anti-Semitism. We are choosing love. There we go.
That's
seamless transition.
That's the Meyers Leonard upgrade from anti-Semitism to love.
Yeah.
So
no, I know Kyrie is furious right now.
Kyrie, he's
Mark Cuban. I like Mark Cuban and everyone. All right, now I'm leaving. You need to get my guy.
He's white too. You could have had him. He was out there could have got him for free. Jesus Christ.
Anyway.
Whew. I've kind of looked at the Heat as like, I always looked at them as an annoying first round out. And now I look at them as like, I don't know, if the Cavs or the Sixers face them in the first round, I don't think they're going to win that series, but I'm not going to count them out.
It definitely separates them from the rest of those. They were already trending that way. Like they had already kind of like, you know,
turned it around.
Yeah, turned it around. They had kind of gotten clear of like the Hawks and the Knicks. And I think this definitely puts them closer to like the Cavs and, you know, some of the, you know, kind of the middle class of the East, you know, like, so I think that I do not want to see them in a 1-8 matchup. Let me just say that would be, especially because they're like,
I think they're too good to fall that far now. Like, I think they're going to be right now. They're the 7 seed, but they're only they're still 2.5 back from the Nets, and the Knicks are ahead of them still.
Yeah.
So it is possible that they could end up in that 7 or 6 seed.
Well, and if you're in the 7 seed, all you have to do is like lose a game to end up fucking.
Oh, true. Yeah. Fuck. I keep forgetting that like, you lose one game. Like Trae Young has a heater in the play-in.
Yeah.
And then you just have that. That actually is a good point. It's still it would be so funny if we spent all year you talking about like, I just don't want to play the Heat and the Bucks and like to have this warpath to the finals. And then the path is literally like Heat, Cavs, Bucks.
That is honest. That is the worst case realistic scenario for the Celtics. Like that would be so fucking brutal, man. Like, ugh.
Yeah, I don't know. I seem to think the Cavs and the Bucks. I get you guys worrying about, even though some of that Cavs stuff was probably just like hot shooting night by the Cavs.
They have rat mode. They've done it to us twice. They almost beat us last year, and they were like so much worse than us. So much worse. So much worse.
Oh, you're talking about the Heat.
The Heat, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. The Celtics are deeper. The Heat are still relying. So there's like there are certain matchups where I'm like, I don't know if Kevin Love can stay on the court in the Celtics series. Mm-hmm. I just think that the defensive issues might be too big for him to remain on the court. I think he could maybe stay on the court for a Bucks series or a Sixer series with the Heat. Mm-hmm. But I look at the Celtics, and when healthy, they have so many guys that can exploit bad defenders that it's possible that he can't even stay on the court for that series. But then their depth is like really like they don't have anything.
But at that point, mission accomplished for Miami. You'd rather play small. Like if you can get away with playing Bam at center and like doing 3 guards going rat mode, like you've won. Like
right. Yeah.
If Jimmy's playing power forward for you as a Heat and it's a matchup where you can survive that, you've won. That's like what they want.
True.
That's why the Celtics. That's why they're like a good matchup for us because we like play right into their strengths. They're like custom made to like give us a hard time. So
yeah. Well, we'll see. I think that you guys would have that this year, but I also thought it was going to be an easy walkover last year. And honestly, as someone, I think someone said, like, I can't wait until they play the Cavs in the first round and they win in 7 with a negative 40-point differential.
Oh, the Heat.
Yeah. That's exactly what they
going to happen.
Yeah. That's exactly what they would have to do in a Celtics series or a Cavs series or whatever series. Like they get destroyed in 2 games and then they like scratch out 3 wins.
It's like with the Raptors when the Celtics played the Raptors in the bubble. It was exactly like that in that series.
The same with the Sixers too. Yeah, Sixers Raptors last year was 3 blowouts. Mm-hmm. It was 3 blowouts in a 6-game series, and they like scratched out 2 wins.
Celtics were like +8 in like a 6-game series they lost against the Heat in that one. Just like, God fucking damn it.
Yeah.
Bam blocking Tatum's dunk in game.
That was that
was it. Anyway, the Heat suck. Investigate their ties to alleged ties to
alleged ties to a man.
A man, yeah.
A man.
There's a New York, just like just Google New York City private school teacher turned billionaire, Les Wexner, attorney, power of attorney, Miami Heat.
Thank you for those context clues.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the All-Star game because
do we have to.
I don't want to be honest. It was. I just want to say. I have to ask you the question because I did a stream during the All-Star game. I watched the All-Star draft, and then I was going to watch the first half and maybe second half of the All-Star game. And then I got a quarter into the game during the stream and was like, this is the worst shit I've ever seen in my life, and I don't want to continue to watch this. So I turned off the stream, and I stopped streaming because I was like, this is just painful. Like, I feel like, is there any way to save the All-Star game? That's been the topic of conversation today. Is there any way to just like not make it total dog shit? Because coming out of All-Star Weekend, as Sixers fans know, the only thing that was enjoyable about it was Mac McClung at the dunk contest. And that, I'm pretty sure, was a publicity stunt by the Sixers, signing him to a two-way literally a week before the dunk contest. Not even a few days before the dunk contest, so that he can wear the Sixers jersey during it and get 250 million views on YouTube or whatever it was. Yeah. So, like, is there any way to save the All-Star game? Or is it just, this is kind of what the All-Star game is now?
It's just like, people have like been talking about this forever. It's like, well, what do you want? What do you want All-Star Weekend in the All-Star game to be? You know, like, do you want it to be a game, an actual game played by like all the best guys, or do you want it to be like a reward honoring like guys for have had like a good season and they get to like have fun and like fuck around, you know, like
right.
I mean, there are like some cool things. I mean, like as a Celtics fan, it was cool to see like them like clear out and let Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum go at each other for like a few possessions there. Like stuff like that is fun. Like, you know, you kind of get to see that, you know, should it be like a one-on-one thing? I don't know. Like, the thing is, you know, people floated like, oh, you could like make them play for charity. You could do this. You could do that. Like,
they already do the charity thing, and no one cares.
Yeah. Okay. There we go.
Like they
didn't even know that. I didn't even know that.
Yeah. It's like the winning team gets more money for they win on whatever, like quarters, and like it. The Elam ending thing made it so that it was fun for the first year or two.
Yeah.
And then you have a game like last night where like the ending isn't even really that close, and the game's over and no one really cares. And even like after the game, like Mike Malone and Jaylen Brown and all of them at their press conference were like, yeah, that was like the worst game I've ever seen. Like it was terrible. I was playing it. No one cared. And it's seemingly like, I don't know. I like, you have guys with injuries that like LeBron just like, I'm not playing the second half. Giannis, he was the captain, so he has to play for one play and then sit out. And then you have Jaylen Brown and Joel Embiid, who are both hurt right now, and they're just playing through their injuries for this game. And seemingly two of the only guys that really gave a shit during the game at any point. Yeah. I just think that, like, I don't know. I kind of think like maybe do away with. Like, I'm sorry, if you're going to the All-Star game and you really just don't care the entire time, then just don't play those guys in the game. Like, Luka and Jokic and all those guys just didn't want to be there, and that's fine. They don't have to be there. You don't have to play the best players. Like, I think about guys that, like, just missed the cut that would literally have died to be there. Like, expand the roster to 20 guys on each conference, and then play those guys for the first few minutes of the game so everyone says, oh, Jokic is here, Luka's here, whoever's here, LeBron is here, whatever. And then after 5 minutes, pull those guys and put in the guys that really give a shit. Like that to me would make it so that at least the game would be competitive. And maybe like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander said, like, incentivize it a little bit more with money. Like, if you score a certain amount of points or if you play a certain amount of minutes or whatever, you get. But guys are more worried about getting injured, which makes sense. I mean, it's a pointless game. I don't know. I think maybe expanding the rosters and just making it so that you can have those guys there and they can do their little run. And then if they truly prove to not give a shit, the coach can have other options and just throw out guys.
Well, how about this? How about we I think another thing that would need to happen is we would need to stop. What I think the fix is you kind of, my fix for the All-Star game would be, you can make it a maximum of 3 or 4 times. And then after that, you can't make the All-Star game again. It's not something that's used as like a Hall of Fame case, because it's weird that we do that anyway, because it only measures the first like 2/3 or 60% of the season anyway. Like all NBA is a way better like indicator of like who was good that year, you know. So maybe like instead
a good example of that is the Fred VanVleet thing last year, where Fred made it in the because he had a hot shooting season for the first half. And then Pascal Siakam was the all NBA representative for the Raptors at the end of the year.
Yeah. And like, you know, Isaiah said in the comments, just shorten the season. Obviously, everyone, they just won't, they will never do that because money.
Yeah. We've talked about this before.
Yeah. But that's the obvious, you're totally correct though. That's the obvious solution. But the thing was, so, you know, don't use it as a measure. And then like, you know, it's not like a novelty. You don't have like Dame and guys who have been there, like LeBron, who's been there a billion times, you know, like you've got guys who are like new to it. They're trying it out, you know, whatever. Like
the league is stacked enough now.
Yeah.
The league is stacked enough now that like you could cycle in guys and like, even if you did like, even this year, like guys that just made the cut, like Jalen Brunson, who's never made it before. Like,
that would be, I think that would be like a lot more fun. Now, I mean, you're not seeing like Giannis and Jokic, but like, by the way, you saw those guys. It fucking sucked. They didn't care. like
Giannis was hurt, but Jokic, yeah.
You'll see him in the playoffs. It's fine. Like, you know, so, and then, you know, just if you want to like do the awards thing, like you could expand all NBA to like 5 teams or something like that. And like, that's the new way that we measure, you know, all NBA or whatever the fuck, you know, like, so.
That's actually not a bad idea because you have the thing is that people at least will turn on their games for the big stars.
Yeah.
And that's what they really care about, when they really should care about creating more diehards and people that will be like have more retention for the game, as opposed to just like, hey, I'll turn it on to see LeBron for whatever. Like, and if you made a more competitive game and you had, like I said, I think you should I don't hate that idea. I think I would just do deeper rosters so you can have, they can still have, hey, when you go on their basketball reference page, it still says all-star. When you go to, you know, you see that they played in the game that year, and you can just pull the guys that very obviously don't give a fuck after 2 seconds.
Well, or how about this? How about if you're one of those guys who's like made enough all-star games that like your stamp, you know, you have like a legends team, and like anyone who wants to go can just be on that team, and then like that could be fun, and then you have like the young all-stars, they all play each other, and then they play the legends team or something like that, like, or whatever the fuck, like,
and then the young all-stars win every time by 40 points because they give a shit.
I don't know. That way you've at least got the people there. I don't know. It can't be saved. It's disgusting.
We should blow up the all-star game is what I'm just do what the NFL did and just go, you know what, we'll just make it a skills competition. Like, although the skills competition sucked too. The only fun part of the weekend was, once again, Mac McClung at the dunk contest, and the reason was he actually like had something to lose. Like, he's made $300,000 in his playing career, and he won $300,000 that night. So like, there was incentive for him to like really give a fuck and put time and effort into it, and it paid off. Like, he was great. He was by far the best dunker that we've had in like 6 years. He
had probably the seminal suburban white kid like fantasy. Like, that is like, if you're a suburban white kid like playing basketball, and this is like what you're dreaming of, is like everybody, you come out and you're the quirked up white boy who's goaded with the sauce and dunking like the ball everywhere. Everyone is stamping you. Every NBA legend is talking about how sick you are.
Shaq is like watching you from yeah. Incredible.
Like how many quirked up white boys are there in America right now who like would trade the rest of their life for that experience? You could tell them you could have this experience and then you're immediately executed. There are like somewhere between I estimate between 7,000 to 100,000 young men Who would take that? Who would take that?
Tyler Hero, after bombing in the 3-point competition, is watching from the sideline. He's like, "It should be me. It should be." Despite having like a way better NBA career and like actually being a good NBA player, like Tyler Hero's like, I would do anything to be Mac McClung in this moment.
Yeah, he and Mac McClung developed like a Solari Mozart relationship where it's just like, I can't beat him. He's too goated with the sauce. He's too quirked up. No.
Incredible performance by Mac McClung, who single-handedly somehow saved the All-Star. It's amazing to me because like I'm like 5'11", 6 foot, and it was just amazing to me watching him. And as my sister said to me, she was like, I thought he was like 5'7" when I was watching because they have like Trey Murphy, Jericho Sims, guys that are like forwards and centers, not even like guards, like that were going up against him, and he looked like he was legitimately like flying in the air. It was fucking crazy to me that he's able to do that shit. Also shout out to Swaggy Mitch from Philly Twitter, who has been tweeting about Mac McClung, not an exaggeration. He's been tweeting about Mac McClung on the Sixers since 2018. He had a tweet from 2018 that someone dug up that said that he's the final piece. When we went to the playoffs that year, we lost to you guys, but we beat the Heat in the first round. Afterwards, he said, just wait until we get Mac McClung and we'll turn into a dynasty. So shout out to Mitch. He's literally been tweeting about Mac McClung for 5 years on the Sixers, ever since he was going viral for dunks back in high school. So yeah. That was absolutely awesome. But all right, so we are going to try something new here, which is something that I've been wanting to do for a little bit of time. And since we just passed All-Star Weekend, I think it was a perfect time to do this. And this is going to be the Mickey Mouse All-Star Draft, which is essentially the most fraudulent All-Star appearances. Sam didn't tell me that he was only doing back to 2000, so I have a few 90s guys that might end up popping up on the list just because I thought that they were interesting. But these are largely the last 20 to 30 years of guys who either shouldn't have been All-Stars, were kind of one-time All-Stars, outliers for their career, or as Sam and I found as we went through our research, completely washed stars that really did not deserve to be All-Stars, but got in based on the fan vote, based on their name. So, Sam, as we always do, I will give you the first pick. We're going to build our teams 12 each, so we'll have 12 picks each. We'll go back and forth the whole time. I will give you the number 1 pick in the Mickey Mouse All-Star Draft.
So I have 2 people here that I could take with my first pick. I feel like I have to, as a hater.
I know who it's going to be.
I will take. This is a little bit of a. This is like a little bit of cheating because like I'm essentially taking 3 different seasons here, but I will be taking Kobe Bean Bryant with the first pick, and
2016.
The beauty of this selection is you have so many options that you can choose. You can choose the 2014-15 Kobe Bryant. You can choose the 2015-16 Kobe Bryant. You can choose the 2013-14 Kobe Bryant. Any of them are, by all accounts, one of the worst like all-star performances. Fun fact, if you go to StatHead and you sort by win shares per 48 on seasons where players made the all-star game.
I didn't know that was a thing you could do. So
there are 1,245 all-star seasons in the NBA history. If you sort, the 3 of the bottom 4 are those Kobe Bryant seasons I just listed in win shares per 48. The only one not being one is Pete Maravich. So again, this makes a lot of sense because Kobe is like stamped by the players.
Of course.
He's loved. He is,
fan favorite, Laker,
like,
won 5 titles by that point.
A guy whose career is like destined to be very outsized compared to like the player who he was. He's, cultural. He's, all of these things, probably not as good of a probably didn't have as much of an impact on winning basketball games as many people think, but like is a huge part of NBA history. And just those last 3 years were dog shit. Like those are some of the worst all-star selections.
The thing about the Kobe legacy thing is you could make the argument that he was at least not one of the 2 or 3 best players of all time that were never the best player. Like there wasn't a season or a stretch where he was actually number one. You could maybe make the argument towards the end of the Lakers run when he was the best player on those 2 titles teams because of some of the playoff performances. But he also had Kobe for as many good big games he had. He also had a ton of stinkers. That was just kind of the player he was. He was streaky, took a ton of tough shots, and as you said, the legacy of Kobe is probably largely outsizes the kind of actual player he was, but in his prime was one of the 5 best players for a decade of his career. And the one thing I'm surprised of, being a real hater that you didn't point out, is that Kobe not only had these kind of Mickey Mouse All-Star, he also had won his second year in the NBA. I'm not sure if you noticed this while going through, but if you look at his second year stats, like it was obvious when Kobe was 19 that he was going to be a future superstar. Yeah. But there are sometimes guys where we get a little bit ahead of ourselves and we say, oh, this guy should be an all-star. In his second season, he didn't start any games for the Lakers in the first half of the season. He came off the bench. He played 26 minutes a game, shot 42% from the field, and averaged 15 points a game, and made the All-Star team in 1998, 1999. And I think this was projecting forward a little bit, for sure. Yeah. But it is worth noting that there might be not only those last 3 that were a little bit were definitely questionable, but the first one was a little bit questionable as well. And the amazing thing about this is even if you take all of that away, he had 10, 11 more All-Star games.
That's the thing, is he's still like a first ballot Hall of Famer, no question.
By a mile,
asked. But that had to be all this like extra stuff. I mean, look, he is the Michael Jordan of Zach LaVine's. Like, don't get it twisted. He is unquestionably the GOAT of high volume guys who were that good. But
that's not fair. Zach LaVine could shoot. Come on.
Let's go. But I was very tickled by that stat. Like, I'm 1,245, and he has 3 of the bottom 4 spots in win shares for 48. That is a statistical, like, that.
Who was the other one?
Pistol Pete
Maravich. Okay. Yeah. Who was honestly another player that was built on ethos.
Exactly.
And obviously Kobe's a way, way better player, one of the 15 best players of all time. Yeah. But like the thing with Pistol Pete was that he was basically the hooper before the hooper. Yeah. And he was and was one of the most decorated college players of all time.
Late breaking slot, by the way. Pat Beverley going to the Bulls.
The Bulls. Okay, so damn it. I don't know. I was just hoping for I guess it's good he's not going to the Bucks.
Yeah.
I think that's probably what happened was he was waiting to see where Russ went, and then he was going to go to that's shitty. I was kind of hoping that the Sixers would get him. I'm going to be honest. I still don't trust Shake Milton as the 4th guard in a playoff series. I was hoping that Pat Bev would end up on the Sixers just kind of as more of an insurance policy and a matchup guy. But I guess he wants real playing time. And honestly, he's probably going to start for them, right? It's him or be him or Caruso. Yeah. So.
But they might want Caruso off the bench. You know what I'm saying? Like he might fit better with like some of their like Levine and DeRozan. Like they need him more. I don't know though. I don't know. Whatever.
I mean, look, they're going to be their goal is to make the play-in, and Pat Bev will help. Like I mean, sure. Pat Bev is a fine 3rd guard at this point in his career. Maybe more on a contending team might be more of a 4th guard spot minute guy, but on a team like the Bulls, I think it's a perfectly fine signing. I mean, if your goal is to be competitive, he's going to help you be competitive, even though he's had a little bit of a down year. But yeah, so okay, that's very disappointing. I was at least hoping he was going to go to like the Bucks or the Sixers or somewhere where it was a little bit more exciting and like he would be like a real guy on a playoff team. But maybe those offers just really weren't out there for him. Like I think the Meyers Leonard signing was that they were chasing after him. And he decided, I want to get more playing time, and if I go to the Bulls, I'll get more playing time. Yeah, because he still might want to get paid after this. Like that's another part of this, is that like he hasn't had a ton of big contracts in his career, so always looking out for another bag. Although that Barstool bag is probably huge, I'd imagine that podcast is massively successful.
Yeah. He's making the money.
So shout out to Daryl Morey, who got Dwayne Dedman instead of Patrick Beverley and Kevin Love. And also shout out to Roan, the co-host of the podcast, who's from Philly and couldn't even convince his podcast co-host to sign with the Sixers. Way to go, guys.
Boo. Just before you pick, I want to dip back to Kobe one more time, because like his worst one, he has a negative win share on the 13-14 season, but he only played 6 games that season. So
that was the year he got hurt. Yeah.
Right. So, but what is fascinating is the 15-16 season, he had a negative win shares and played 66 games.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
A negative win share per.
That was the last year of his career, right? That was when he retired. Yeah. All right. Let's see. Kobe had all-star selections. We're going to see how many all-star games he had. So he had 18. So even if you remove the 4 questionable ones, he still had 14, which would put him like top 5 all time.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
He didn't even need these all-star games to have one of the greatest careers in the history of the NBA. It's wild. Most guys never make 4 all-star teams in their carear.
Yeah.
like even some very good players don't. Like you'd be surprised when you go through.
If you put a gun to my head and said, will Jaylen Brown make 4 all-star teams? I'd say I lean yes, but I wouldn't feel great about it. Like
that's a push for me. I think he's going to end up somewhere in that 4 or 5 range, maybe 6. Yeah. But yeah, that's interesting. Okay. So you took Kobe. I had him on my list of wash stars that end up making it too late. Yeah. But I went it back a little bit further than you, and I'm gonna pick someone because this one was the most surprising to me because I had no idea this player made an all-star team in their career.
Okay. Yep.
My first pick is going to be someone who's not nearly as relevant as Kobe Bryant.
Okay.
My pick is Tyrone Hill, who was a Philadelphia 76ers legend, a journeyman throughout his entire career, played for many, many teams in his career, and ended up making the All-Star team in I believe it was his 3rd season in the NBA. Hold on one second. His 5th season in the NBA, he was a center that year. He was a power forward on the Sixers. He was a center that year for the Cleveland Cavaliers, averaged a whopping 13 points a game, 10 rebounds, and had a negative, hold on, I have it listed right here. He had a negative 1.3 BPM, box plus minus. Now, look, box plus minus isn't the greatest indicator, but if you have a negative 1.3 BPM and you make the All-Star team, that's like pretty much unheard of. Average All-Stars have like plus 2.5 to 5 BPMs. Like a negative 1.3 BPM was nothing more than a role player that year throughout his entire career. Never had any sort. It wasn't even like some seasons when you look at these guys, they have like, oh, you had an outlier hot shooting season and you averaged 20 points a game. Or you had, you had guys who were just like, had a ton of injuries and like never really quite reached their potential, but made an all-star team or two. Even guys like Doc Rivers was one guy who made one all-star team. But if you look at Doc's stats and like the teams he played on, like there's an argument that Doc should have made multiple all-star teams. He was a really good defender, good scoring point guard who could, facilitate, like was a really good NBA player and played for multiple winning teams. Tyrone Hill that year was basically just a product of, like, there was just not a ton of talent, and it was 1994, 1995, so this was right after Jordan retired the first time, and there was really just a severe lack of talent in the Eastern Conference, and he kind of made it just because he was a center, and they needed an undersized center, and they needed a center to put in there, and he ended up making it that year. So that he was just by far the worst player that I could find that made an all-star team. and was I knew who he was. like there was one guy he was from the 80s though, so I didn't count him. But there was one guy that played for the Dallas Mavericks in the 80s that I legitimately had never heard of in my entire career. His last name was Donaldson, James Donaldson. He made it in 1988. I have never heard of this man. He had very pedestrian stats as well. But Tyrone Hill, I at least knew as a journeyman, played for the Sixers. And so, yeah, he's my number 1 overall pick because that was the worst statistical output I could find. And the Cavs weren't even that great that year. So I just don't really understand why he made the All-Star team at all.
Yeah, I mean, there's like, we'll get into it. There are some, like I said, I tried to kind of limit myself to like ones where the last 20 to 30 years just because like, I wanted to have watched these guys so I could like have the context.
Sure. Well, I watched Tyrone Hill. So.
Oh, you did watch Tyrone Hill. Okay.
He was on the Sixers when I was like for 2 years, 3 years. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
He was my first Sixers team I ever remember.
Yeah. Cause I mean, there's guys like there's this guy, Kevin Duckworth and Truck Robinson are popping up a lot.
Yeah. I don't know who either of those guys are.
When you do some of this filtering.
Were they the 70s?
Yeah. Well, Kevin Duckworth was late 80s, early 90s. And then, Truck Robinson was like 70s, late 80s. The New Orleans Jazz for him. So that was
wow. So that's how long.
Yeah. So very tough. But, okay. Well, I will move on. Like I said, I'm keeping it kind of. I will go with who I think one of the single worst all-star selections, I think, in the last 30 years. Baffling, really strange. I think it has something to do with how they manage these positions, but let's get my guy Chris Kaman in here.
Chris Kaman, I forgot about Chris Kaman.
Who made an all-star team in 2009, 2010. Just
that was that recent?
I think it was because centers were like
just shitty.
Just shitty. Yeah, they just were. He had a negative VORP that year, negative box plus minus. His true shooting percentage as a center, mind you, was 52% true shooting. That's true shooting.
In defense of Chris Kaman, if I remember correctly, he was mid-range 3-point shooting big, right? He shot threes and mid-range shots, right? Or am I misremembering him?
He did shoot some threes. He had a 3-point attempt rate of 0.5%. So
okay, so maybe not.
Maybe not. He had a 16.5 PER, which if you know how PER works, it's almost impossible to be a big man and have a PER like if your PER is less than 15 as a big man, you're like dog water.
To put it in perspective, Robert Williams is like Wilt Chamberlain levels.
Yeah, Robert Williams has like a 30 PER.
Yeah.
All time. Just like insane, like his rebounding, his total rebound rate was 15.6, which is like not very good.
No,
to be totally honest. This is like single-handedly, like in recent memory, the worst like single season by a guy who is not like a generational great. Like I'm sure we will go back to the washed guys like making the league again, but this is pound for pound one of the worst all-star selections of all time. The 09-10 Chris Kaman Clippers.
Yeah, that was really bad. There were one of the common trends when you're looking throughout history and you're looking at these terrible seasons, a lot of centers, a lot of guys that were just like product of circumstance. Like there was basically only a handful post 90s, especially. Yeah. There was only a handful of star centers. And the large majority of guys were just like, we need a big body to put on Shaq. Like, it was like in the 2000s, it was like, we need someone who can guard Shaq and Duncan. And everyone else is just like, at best, a defensive specialist, a Ben Wallace type, who was very good, obviously, not even Ben Wallace slander, but like, it was that mold of player. And then you just had like guys that would make the All-Star team. The mid 2000s to late 2000s big is probably the worst archetype of all-star we've ever had in recent memory. And I'm going to pick another one with my next pick, which is very similar to Chris Kaman. and that is Jamal McClung of the
team.
Jamal McClung made an all-star team in 2004 with the New Orleans Hornets. They had just moved there. And Jamal McClung in this season had just very pedestrian stats. He had a negative 1.6 BPM. He averaged, hold on one second. He averaged 13 points and 10 rebounds. Shot a cool 47% from the field with literally never being any sort of stretch big. He was very much a inside the arc kind of putbacks and dunks and was not a scoring big by any means. And is one of the more mystifying selections that we've ever had. And a lot of this comes back to the stuff we just talked about. It was just positional shit. Like you needed to have a center. And the 2004, it was the 2003-2004 team. They just didn't have anyone else. So they're like, okay, I guess Jamal McClung is the selection. So that was possibly some Canadian bias here. Only the second Canadian to ever make an all-star team at the time. Certainly doesn't hurt the NBA's ratings in Canada, I'm sure, if they have a all-star that is a representative of Canada. But yeah, the 2003-2004 all-star team. And the funny thing is, if you look at most of these all-star rosters, the teams were pretty good. Like every other player that was on the team was a guy you knew. Like it was like at the very, like it was mostly guys that, like, all right. So for example, the Eastern Conference All-Stars, because remember New Orleans was still in the Eastern Conference back then because they hadn't moved to the West yet. So it was Iverson, McGrady, Vince Carter, Jermaine O'Neal, Ben Wallace, Baron Davis, Jason Kidd, Michael Redd, Paul Pierce, Ron Artest, and Kenyon Martin. So essentially everyone there was on a very good team. Like the other worst all-star you could pick from this year was, and this was also when the West was way more stacked than the East. The other one is someone I'm going to save for later. Actually, I just realized who it was. Mm-hmm. So I have him on my list, and I'm going to include him later. But, like, pretty much every other guy on the Eastern Conference team, like, even Kenyon Martin was, like, one of the best players on one of the best teams in the Eastern Conference for, like, 4 years in the Nets. So, like, and Ron Artest was, like, arguably the best. He was the best defensive wing. He was, like, one defensive player of the year and shit. So, like, he's basically the only player that was like completely undecorated from this Eastern Conference team. And yeah, just an incredibly bizarre selection that really that has aged even worse than it was at the time.
He was on my list.
Okay.
So we are right there. So I'll stay with the theme. We're having a run on centers who aren't very good and were a product of circumstance in the Eastern Conference. So unfortunately, I don't want to do it to him. We got to get my guy Big Z in here.
Zydrunas Ilgauskas.
He was a two-time All-Star.
He made two All-Star teams.
He made two All-Star teams. Neither of which were very impressive. Honestly, his 05-06 was probably his best season, and that was not the year that he
say, in fairness to Big Z, he was not as bad as any of these. Like he had some decent offensive seasons in his career, and obviously was not quite good enough to be like the second best player on a finals team, or the third best player on a finals team, but. Yeah,
he pretty regularly had a 1920 PER, which is like, what we like usually say, like what you're looking for like a big guy. But like the thing here, though, is like, again, there's another guy who has even more cachet than these guys. But the fact that all these guys made an all-star team is kind of crazy when you look at some of the other guys that were making it. Like, I'm not saying like Big Z isn't like bad the way that like Chris Kaman and some of these like other guys are.
Yeah,
he's still like not an all-star by any stretch of the imagination. No. Like at no point in his career was he like ever even like close to that. So like
if he played another position, he wouldn't even been in consideration. It was just the product of the center sucking.
Yeah, and then I have like one more guy like that I will probably pick next. If you don't pick him, then
I think I'm going to pick him.
Okay.
Yeah. I think I'm going to pick him. I have some other guys. I'll save the 90s guys for later since we're doing mainly 2000s and on.
Okay.
And there's actually two guys, but I barely remember the one guy, so I won't pick him. So I'm not goddamn. This is basically the most popular archetype by a wide margin because there's a guy that made two that you could pick here, and that's Brad Miller, who I'm considering taking Brad Miller. I'm also considering taking someone else. You know what? I'll take Brad Miller because Brad Miller was the perfect example of we need a big body to guard Shaq.
Yep.
Perfectly above average offensive player for center, a big body, played on good teams. That's the one thing about Brad Miller is that he played on good teams and he made two All-Star games. If I remember correctly, Brad Miller, I think he made two All-Star teams on two different teams.
Yeah.
Yeah. Back-to-back seasons as an All-Star in the East with the Pacers and then in the West with the Sacramento Kings the next year. That is how low the bar was. Considered one of the best undrafted players of all time because of the fact that he played in this era, averaged, 13 points a game, 14 points a game in back-to-back seasons in those years, was just pretty pedestrian as far as in terms of his advanced stats were a little bit better. If you look at his basketball reference page, like he did have a positive BPM at least. He had like a +2 or a +3 in certain years, but like I don't think that anyone is fondly looking back on the Brad Miller era of the NBA. And I mean, just to prove it, like he got traded 3 times in this stretch.
Yeah,
he played for Chicago, then he ended up on the Pacers, then he ended up on Sacramento. So he got traded twice, played for 3 teams. So Brad Miller is the one. I'm not even joking. I literally only remember him because I remember just like this definition of an all-star who basically made it because we just needed centers and we needed guys who we could throw on Shaq in the mid 2000s.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm going to go, the run on centers is going to continue just because I don't want to start dragging all-star greats through the mud, except for Kobe, who I already did. So I am going to do, so this guy, he is one of these 2-time all-star center guys who made it. He deserved one of his all-star years. He actually was like a good player.
I remember this.
It inflated everyone's value of him. And like everyone was like shocked when he like literally couldn't play. Like he was one of the most important players on a conference finals team. And then like 2 years later was like almost out of the league. And
Roy Hibbert.
And it was Roy Hibbert, yes.
Yes.
Who in 13-14 made an all-star game despite having like one of the worst statistical seasons of all time. Was not even really a good defender at this point. He did play 81 games.
The first time around, he was like a really good rim protector and rebounder, if I remember correctly. Yes, exactly. And then the second time he made it like 2 years later when he was on the way out of the league, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, he was out of the league like 3 years later, but like this was like a just he had like a 4 VORP, a negative 1.4 BPM like this year. Or sorry, a 0.4 VORP. Like
I was gonna say 4 is really good.
True shooting percentage under 50% as a center. That is like impossible. Like
it's really bad.
Yeah, like Robert Williams is and like DeAndre Jordan have like a true shooting percentage of like 80. like
yeah,
and he's like a 7-2 guy who like never shot outside of like the restricted area. Like,
yeah, people shit on DeAndre Jordan for this. DeAndre Jordan was way better than any of these players that we're mentioning.
Exactly,
very effective in his role. Good rim protecting center, rebounder, lob threat, like.
Yeah, I mean, can I be honest? Like when I started this, I was like, okay, how far am I going to go before I get to the Jeff Teague, like Atlanta Hawks?
Sure, not even close.
Not on my list, to be honest. Like, which is crazy. Like
he was actually pretty good that year. Yeah,
yeah. Like Kyle Korver, also pretty good. Like I'm looking at, some of this like historical stuff, and people just didn't like, I guess people just like didn't care about this stuff. Like the internet has like really turned like sickos like us loose on like this whole process where like voters and like people have to like actually pay attention to this. Like it just seemed like everyone's like a lot smarter about this stuff than they like used to be. Again, because deranged sickos like us are fucking yelling at them or making fun of them for it. But I don't know. I just think it's like so crazy that like this archetype of like centers being bad, and like we finally saw that archetype come to rest with the trade of Rudy Gobert.
Right. Yeah. Speaking of, I have several Rudy Gobert seasons that I'm kidding. I did not include him on here. All right. So let me get away from that archetype because I have one more guy left that I could draft here, but and I'll save the 90s guys for later, like I said. Okay. But I'll go with a more recent one, and this I actually do think the Kyle Korver one was completely Mickey Mouse. He shot 52% from three to start that year. It ended up coming down to 49. He had an amazing season in terms of shooting. Don't get me wrong. Yeah. But he was the fourth best player on that Atlanta Hawks team. Yeah. And that Atlanta Hawks team, I know it's easy to say that now in retrospect that we know that they got stomped by LeBron in the playoffs, and they did win 60 games. But for your team to get 4 All-Stars, 4. Yeah. How many teams throughout NBA history have had 4 All-Stars?
I can't remember.
It's got to be like the Showtime Lakers, the 80s Celtics, like it's maybe the Bulls. Like like it's maybe the Bulls, maybe the Golden State 1 year. I think they had 1 year or 2 years where they had 4 guys. But like we're talking about the greatest teams of all time. Yeah. And then the Atlanta Hawks, who had 2 deserving All-Stars in Paul Millsap and Al Horford, and then one guy in Jeff Teague, who you could make the argument for, actually had a pretty good year. And then you had Kyle Korver, who, all things considered, still averaged like 13 points a game, was a role player, was very effective in his role for that team. But like, he averaged 12 points a game. Like, if your main function is a shooter-scorer type, and you're the fourth guy on your team, and you're averaging 12 points a game and playing like he wasn't a bad defender, but he was like a fine defender. Like I just think that like once again, people give shit to Klay Thompson for being overrated. Like,
and by the way, he pops up a lot when you do the
advanced stats. Don't love Klay.
Yeah,
but
he pops up a lot.
But Klay is one of the greatest shooters of all time. Probably the second or third best movement shooter of all time, and was at his peak was a really good on-ball defender. And he deserved to make at least 2 or 3 All-Star teams. And I have to take Kyle Korver here because it's one of the more recent ones that I can remember, and I just think it's ridiculous that a team had 4 guys make it, and I think only really 2 of those guys were deserving. Now, the East sucked. The East just always sucked during those years, which made it tough to find guys during that little stretch when it was really bad. But I still think that statistical output, like, I don't care what the advanced stats say, like, I can't buy into that guy being an all-star who's essentially just a role player, a fourth option, a guy that you're mainly running off screens and isn't bringing a ton for you defensively.
Kevin Arnovitz, the devil's greatest trick was convincing us all that he didn't exist and he wasn't a man named Kevin Arnovitz. This is his legacy is getting Kyle Korver in the All-Star game.
It was so amazing to watch those Hawks teams.
Zach, I just effervescently, like I just thought of this is a team that is just the joy with which they brought. I love it. And, I think Chris Middleton should make 737 All-Star games. I would put Chris Middleton in the All-Star game every year. I would put him in ahead of LeBron James. I would put him ahead of Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. I would put him ahead of Bill Russell. I would put him ahead of Tim Duncan. Chris Middleton should be in the game every time. Now, is that just because he plays for the Milwaukee Bucks? I mean, yes, my Southern heart has a little bit of a soft spot for these smaller teams. But God, I miss him. I wish Zach's got to bring him back on the low post. Yeah,
let's bring him back. Let's just bring him back and say, hey, Kevin, you haven't watched a game in a year, but tell us what you think. I bet you would be more coherent and good, than the large majority of podcasters.
I give Kevin shit because he just was the small market he would his thing now would be gushing about the Grizzlies like everybody else does.
Sure.
But but he was a pretty good analyst. It's very funny that not funny, but
now that he's gone, we miss him so much.
Miss him, yeah. He's out of a job. Meanwhile, the King Windhorst is just doing gossip, knows nothing about the NBA, but just has a 7-figure job talking about gossip. I love
He's just spilling tea about Russell Westbrook and
the messiest bitch in the NBA.
It's basically it's basically like The View, but for sports. And
No, he's like TMZ. He's essentially TMZ. The reporting is accurate, but it's it's sloppy and messy.
Yeah, it's the sloppiest of the slop.
Yeah,
literally.
Yeah.
All right, so you're up next.
I am up. Okay, let me go back to my little list.
The 9th pick.
All right, time to go back to the well, and I'm going to be public enemy number 1 for doing this on a Sixers podcast, but
I have him on my list too.
Yeah. We got to talk about. No, he wasn't on the Sixers, but we do have to put the answer on here because
2010.
There's two that were really bad. I have the 09-10 Allen Iverson's one, and then the 08-09. So back-to-back years. I think one was Memphis, Detroit, and then I think one was just Detroit. Bad, really bad. I mean, AI, a pretty similar thing to Kobe, to be honest, where it's I think they were pretty similar types of players. Kobe had way more longevity because he's bigger, and probably a little bit more skilled, a little less reliant on athleticism the way AI was, is a 5'10" fucking point guard in the NBA, but it's I wanted to hold off on taking AI as long as possible because I do really like AI. I think the practice thing is one of the most iconic things of all time, and I think he generally got a bad rap because of where sports media was at the time when everyone kind of went after guys like AI for not always saying the exact politically correct thing all the time. So
yeah, it was racist. Media was very racist.
Yeah. So this is don't really want to go after AI for this, but Jesus Christ, were those seasons really fucking bad?
Yeah, it would essentially be if Russ still made the All-Star team.
Yeah, exactly. That's a perfect example. Yeah.
It was basically statistically, and even those teams weren't good. He was basically he was at the tail end of his career. He didn't adjust to any sort of new role, was kind of, a much less effective version of his older self. And as you said, aged not great for a guy who was a superstar at one point in his career. So I also had him on my list. That was when the fan vote was way more influential.
Yeah,
that was when the fan vote pretty much got in guys that everyone just wanted to see. And one of the things about the All-Star game back then is players also wanted to play with Allen Iverson. And guys that grew up watching Iverson were oh yeah, I want to go play with him in the All-Star game. So I'm sure that there wasn't a lot of pushback because it was just fun, basically. Yeah. Back when, the All-Star game was still somewhat fun in some capacity. But yeah, no, he definitely deserves to be on there. He was one of the few stars that should have been included for sure. To go away from the stars in the center thing, I can go with I'll go with more recent guys. Honestly, and this one isn't from a statistical output. He actually had a very good season this season, but it's still one of the more mystifying selections of my life.
We're doing Drew.
No, I'm not taking Drew. No. No, I mean, look, Drew, for all the shit that I gave Drew on when he got selected over Harden, as a two-way guy on the second best player on the second best team in the Eastern Conference right now, I at least understand the selection for sure. This one was more like analytical darling. It almost felt like a pity award kind of thing. I'm going to go with Mike Conley in 2021.
Okay.
Here's why. Yeah. His stats were good. They weren't quite peak Mike Conley good, but they were still good. He was still an effective defender, good shooter. As we can see, he still contributes to winning basketball, and his advanced stats were really good.
Yeah.
But I don't know if you remember this 2 years ago in 2021.
Yeah.
He was not selected to the All-Star team. He didn't get into the All-Star team.
He backed in. He was an injury replacement.
He wasn't even an injury replacement. They literally just got there, and they were like, yeah, Mike, you can come to the All-Star game. I remember, I'm still like dude, I'm telling you, go look at that year's All-Star team. I swear to God, all right, so here's the thing. They were going to do the thing where they just didn't replace. I'm looking up the All-Star game right now, but they were going to do the thing where they didn't replace an injured guy. Like there was like a Devin Booker or Donovan Mitchell or someone was hurt that year. And Mike Conley just like made it onto the team somehow. Like they have one extra player on their team, if you look at it. And Devin Booker was injured, but they just weren't going to replace him. And then last second, literally like the day before the All-Star team, they were like, Mike Conley, you're on the All-Star team. It was so strange. I think technically he was an injury replacement, and that's what they put it down as.
Yeah.
But like, I swear to God, I vividly remember being like, wait, so they're just not going to replace Devin Booker? And then like the day before, they were like, Mike Conley, you're an All-Star. And it felt weird because it was one of the better years of his career in terms of like advanced metrics. But like he was the third best player on a Jazz team that was very good, number one seed at the time in the Eastern or in the Western Conference. And you could make the argument that they deserve 3 All-Stars, but in retrospect, it just feels weird that they were just like, like last second, like they felt bad that he was the best player to never make an All-Star team, basically, because he should have really made an All-Star team earlier in his career. There was one year, particularly early in Damian Lillard's career. Dame's another guy that kind of had this weird run where like he made the All-Star team too early in 2012 and averaged like 20 points a game on like okay efficiency and was like clearly going to be very good, but they picked him over Mike Conley. And then Dame missed the All-Star team in 2 of his best years because of the guys that he was going up against in the Western Conference a little bit later. And I don't know. I that Conley selection always sits weird with me just because I feel like, yes, Mike Conley should have been an All-Star at some point in his career, but it just felt very strange that they just were like last second injury replacement when they weren't going to replace Devin Booker at all. And then they decided to just give it to Mike Conley. So
it's so like funny that they just had to, I mean, you just got to reward like a small market guy who like doesn't cause a fuss. Like, that's like what
a great guy, all things considered, and once again, would have been the best player to ever make an All-Star team probably. Cause he was like, he was at his peak, like a top 2 guy on a really competitive team. And then later in his career actually aged very well.
Yeah. Well, and the West was just loaded at guard for like his entire career. Like, it was like you had fucking Russ, CP,
Steph, Kobe, Harden.
Yeah, like a lot of fucking, and then like later on Devin Booker and like some of the, it was like just a really tough sledding at guard in the West. Well, I mean, if we're ready to move on from that, I've got a pretty
juicy one,
a pretty similar style selection. So this is a little bit of cheating because it is an injury replacement, but it's still like crazy to me. Considering this season, because I don't think of this guy as like this guy. He's not like Mike Conley, where it's like this guy has to have been an All-Star at some point. He just was a very good player. He was named an injury replacement on this season when Kevin Love got hurt. When it's like not even one of his like 5 or 6 best seasons of his career. And that is Goran Dragic, who made an All-Star team with the Heat as an injury replacement in 17-18.
Oh yeah, I do remember that because Sixers fans were pissed because they thought Ben Simmons should have made it. Rookie Ben Simmons should have made it over him, and he didn't. And
he probably should have. Like, he was
better that year.
He was better that year. It was like not a good season. Like, young Ben was actually good before his brain broke. Like, this is like Goran Dragic, I like him, but like
Very good player, but yeah.
Great player. Is it an age 31 season, And it's like very like solid stats, 16 PER, 54 true shooting percentage, like, 1.4 VORP. But like you sort all that out. That's like almost exactly the middle of like his career marks. Like,
it wasn't his best season. He had his best season in Houston, if I remember correctly.
In Phoenix, actually.
Phoenix, okay.
Yeah, that Phoenix team that won 48 games and still didn't make the playoffs.
Yeah.
So there was that one, and it wasn't even his best Heat season. In 16-17, he was like way better. He shot almost 60% true shooting and a 19.8 PER and like higher usage, lower turnovers. Like, it's just really bizarre middling thing. And I the year jumps out at me there because like 17-18, there were like guys then. Like the East was done with its like,
it was rounding into form for sure.
Yeah, like, so that's a bizarre one. That's pretty Mickey Mouse. I mean, injury replacement, so like maybe I'm cheating a little bit there, but
sure. No, that counts.
But that just seems crazy to me that like Goran Dragic was like an all-star and like Mike Conley almost wasn't, Like,
yeah, it is weird, especially considering the eras. Like,
yeah.
But then again, like, I think if you were to compare Mike Conley and Kyle Lowry's career, they're extremely similar in terms of statistical output, in terms of impact on the teams they were on, all of that. And Kyle Lowry is going to end his career with 5 All-Star selections, and Mike Conley will end his career with 1 because of the fact that he played in such a tougher conference. And CJ McCollum got a lot of shit recently for saying I would have been an all-star if I was in the East. People say that all the time. And I was like, he's right. He 100%. The guard in the Eastern Conference, we're talking about Goran Dragic making it in.
Yeah, right.
CJ McCollum was better than Goran Dragic. Like, I very much think that the Goran Dragic selection, it might be a little bit of hindsight bias here. Because if I remember correctly, at the halfway mark of that season, the Sixers and the Heat had very similar records. Mm-hmm. And the Sixers obviously already had Joel Embiid as the all-star for that team.
Yeah.
So the argument that the Sixers should have had 2 all-stars might not have been as strong, but then they ripped off 17 straight wins to end the season. Was
that the year they made all the midseason moves with like getting Tobias?
That was the next year. So, So this was 17-18. So this was... Embiid gets hurt and Ben goes on that tear to end the season after, because the joke was that he was so mad that Goran Dragic made it over him that they won like 17 in a row, and then the Sixers ended up with over 50 wins. But at the All-Star break, we were like 500. Like, we were not that good, and Embiid missed a ton of games in that stretch at the end of the year, and then missed some in the beginning of the year too. So our record was not that great at the All-Star break. So that might have been the argument, is that the Heat needed a representative because they had a similar record or whatever.
And that was a bad Heat team. Remember they traded like 2 first-round picks for Goran Dragic? They were like way out to like the Suns. Like that team, that was like the Suns team with like Dion Waiters and Kelly Olynyk and like James Johnson and then like all those, that really bad, gross Hassan Whiteside, I think was the other guy who like might have gotten
Tyler Johnson was on
Josh Richardson, I think, was on those teams too.
Did Hassan Whiteside make an all-star team?
I don't think so.
I don't think he did. I think that he was in consideration 1 or 2 years, but
I will look it up right now, and we will know.
I'm pretty sure he didn't though, because I know Drummond made a few, but Drummond actually at his peak was like,
he had great stats.
Like, his stats were insane, dude.
Yeah. So like he could at least get there.
Sure.
No all-stars for our guy Hassan. So
I was gonna say he definitely was in consideration at least 1 or 2 years.
Ready or not, here he comes.
We were all like, God, another. Of course. And then they signed him to $100 million contract, and you're like, oh, maybe not. They traded him by like year 2 or year 3, whatever it was.
Didn't they get out of that like pretty penalty free?
Oh yeah, they gave up.
Yeah.
So I can explain it very vividly because it makes me want to shoot myself in the head.
Yeah.
So Goran Dragic gets hurt. I'm sorry, Goran Dragic. Yusuf Nurkic gets hurt for the Portland Trailblazers.
Oh my God.
And the Trailblazers need a center. So Pat Riley calls up Neil O'Shea and he's like, look, you have a center. We'll just give you Hassan Whiteside for nothing. We'll just give him to you. And they dumped him to the Blazers. and they needed to clear that space to get Jimmy Butler in a sign and trade for the Philadelphia 76ers in the 2019 offseason. So they got off scot-free from that contract because there was only 1 year left on the deal, so it was a lot easier for a team to just be like, okay, we'll just take it into our. I think I'm guessing Portland had like 1 or 2 contracts they had to move around. They might have traded I think it was like Mo Harkless and someone else.
I think they traded. Was that the year they got the buyer's remorse with Alan Crabb and sent him back to the Nets? Remember the Nets?
Yeah, it might have been something like that. Yeah,
the Nets signed the offer sheet for him
to match him.
Trailblazers matched, and then we're like, oh fuck, no, we'll trade him to you.
Yeah, I think they sent out Mo Harkless and Alan Crabb, and then they took Hassan Whiteside back, and that was the trade. They didn't have to the Heat didn't have to send out picks. They just got off it completely scot-free. And there were several contracts in that run. Dion Waiters that they got off pretty scot-free, James Johnson, and it was just for the cost of Justice Winslow for Andre Iguodala and Jay Crowder to the Grizzlies back then.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So that there were a few. Tyler Johnson, they got off pretty cleanly. He ended up going to the Suns and then didn't do anything with them. So, yeah, that stretch was disgusting. But
it's funny because the Heat have fucked up a lot. But
they only get credit for getting rid of the contracts.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. But then they wiggle their way out of it.
The
Justice Winslow thing. They could have had 4 first-round picks from the Celtics.
I know.
It would have been fake. But can you imagine? God damn, dude.
Well, that's part of the reason why I look at the Kevin Love signing and I go, am I just tricking myself here? Because they've done this a few times with guys who were washed. Yeah. And sometimes they can find, Dwayne Dedmon was actually pretty good for them 2 years ago. And he came in and was an effective backup center. Yeah. But then that same season, they also traded for Trevor Ariza, who was terrible for them. Yeah. So it could go either way, but I'm trusting the history of them just fucking, kind of going rat mode and figuring out a way to get the best out of these guys. But all right, so we're going to move on to the next pick. We had Goran Dragic there. There was just a few little things. By the way, did you know that Andre Kirilenko only made 1 All-Star game in his entire career?
That seems kind of crazy.
He was
really good.
Really good.
Yeah.
A really, really good versatile defender. Very ahead of his time in terms of his archetype.
I think that's what it is. He was he would definitely make it these days, but just people didn't respect that skill set. Back in the day, he was not a hooper. So
it was also harder for European guys to make it 20 years ago. It just it was just kind of was. It was you had to be Pau Gasol or Dirk Nowitzki good to be a surefire all-star guy.
Yeah, right.
That was just very obvious with those two. But so I got a few guys here. I can go. I'll once again, I'll save the older guys for a little bit later. But let's go with someone who I actually did watch, and I'm going to go with a guy who should have made an All-Star game at a point in his career, but he didn't make it, and he made it the wrong year essentially. Okay, and that's Tyson Chandler.
On my list.
Yeah. Yep. Tyson Chandler was basically towards the end of his career when he made it. I know he ended up playing 6 more years because he just was kind of a bench guy for a while. Yeah. But the year that he made it with the Knicks, 2 years before, he was amazing with the Mavericks, helped them win the finals. The next year, he wins Defensive Player of the Year with the Knicks. And then the year after that, he's just kind of decent. And actually had a down year in terms of statistical production. And he made the All-Star team kind of more based on his rep than he did from actually being one of the best players. He was still good. It's very similar to the Goran Dragic thing. It's similar to the Mike Conley thing in that he should have made an All-Star team. He probably just made it in the wrong season. He probably made it in a year that he shouldn't have made it. But the thing was that the Knicks were better that year, if I remember correctly. That was the year that they got Melo, and they were more competitive. And then he was coming off of the Defensive Player of the Year award. So, and Eastern Conference All-Star, once again, centers were not great. So I think that very, very worthy that he made an All-Star team. Probably should have made more, but it was just at the point in his career that he should not have.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. I don't have much to add there, to be honest.
Yeah.
All right, so moving on to me. Now I'm trying to decide because again, like we've hit in this, there's archetypes, there's I've got a couple of guys I could choose from who were like at the end of their career and got the cursory like last All-Star selection. I think it was actually the same year it was. So I'll go with one of them. I'll go with the one I have more vitriol for. Well, how about the 18-19 All-Star selection for Dwayne Wade? Who
I forgot about that one.
Doo-doo. Mucho doo-doo. No, but the thing was, the same time, there was another guy, also bad, also washed, who had a career inextricably linked to him, who also made it in the West. And they
Dirk
made
Nowitzki.
it like a little thing. Yes, it was Dirk.
Yeah.
Those two like should not have made it, but they were both retiring. So like they made it
so they
into,
both
like, a little like
the honorary one.
Yeah, isn't this like fun? But it like
They
wasn't
both hadn't
honorary.
made an All-Star team in like 5 or 6 years.
Yes. And they let me just say those two jump right the fuck off the page in terms of like guys who didn't deserve to make an All-Star selection.
Yeah.
Like
But that doesn't always happen too, is the weird thing. We do it for certain guys, but not for all the guys. Like I know Vince Carter was much older and had a different career and like wasn't as good as Wade or Nowitzki, but like they didn't do it for Vince Carter.
It's like just guys who won a title with the team as the best guy for a team that drafted them. Like that's like what it is. It's like or a team that like they only played for that. Yeah, Kobe wasn't technically drafted by the Lakers, but you get what I'm saying. Like those type of like franchise fucking, you know, guys.
Look at these shining beacons. Yeah. Even though Dwayne Wade like went to 3 different teams, other than that, like he played for the Bulls and the Cavs. That was it, just the Bulls and the Cavs.
Even though Cuban was like running some sort of like Chechen scam to like under the table, like pay Dirk like $34 million so he could only sign that. Remember, he signed for like a $10 million contract.
Like, it was like
everyone was like, it's a little weird.
Hey, it's only okay when the Patriots do this.
Yeah, that's true. At least there's a hard cap in football, right?
Well, there is in basketball too. You just have to do certain moves to trigger it.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
If you can always go over the cap for your guys in basketball, like the bird rights shit. So
it's tough to argue with the results, though. He did a great job. They needed to clear that cap space for
so they could let Tyson Chandler walk. Yeah,
they could let Tyson Chandler walk so they could get Dwight. They could sign Dwight Howard and Darren Williams. Oh wait, whoops! They didn't get either of those guys.
Oopsie!
They ended up with Darren Williams later after he was so bad the Nets fucking I think waived him or I can't remember exactly what the order of operations was there, but that was really bad.
Even Wade had somewhat of a bounce back season that year because he was really bad for like 3 years. There was like that stretch when he played for Cleveland, he was terrible. Yeah. He was really bad in Chicago. He had somewhat of a bounce back season for him. Like
his most relevant NBA moment in Cleveland was like fucking praying for Gordon Hayward after he blew his ankle out.
Yeah. And that was the year before, I believe. Yeah, that was 17-18. Yeah. But like Dwayne Wade, honestly, if we're gonna go Wade here, you probably should argue Dirk would go ahead of him though.
He should have. It was worse. Yeah,
Dirk averaged 7 points a game.
That's like one of the worst. By BPM, that's the second worst one of all time.
Yeah, that's horrible.
Besides that injured Kobe season.
I was going to say, at least Wade had a positive BPM that season and shot an average like, 15 points a game. Like, and was a little bit more efficient from the field. Like, he had, and if you remember early in that season, he had that huge game-winning shot against the Warriors. Yeah. Do you remember that when he jumped up on the table?
Yes.
So like he had like moments that season. He actually, and they ended up getting back to the playoffs that season. Like, I at least get the argument a little bit more with Wade. I
also just hate Dwayne Wade.
Celtics fan.
Yeah, destroyed his elbow and
All right, then I'll just take Dirk at 14. Make it easy.
Sure.
Because I mean, dude, he was not. Look. Both of these guys deserve to make it as an honorary All-Star, but it
Not
is
at the expense of actual guys who are good.
That's what I'm saying. Like, there are
yeah.
guys that missed the All-Star teams during these seasons where, like, once again, the talent pool by that point was much better. And, like, there are guys that should probably have an extra All-Star game on there that didn't make it because we wanted to be nice to, very similar to the Mike Conley thing, but just with much, much better players. Like, we wanted to be nice and recognize their careers for being, not being like LeBron and running away, but running from the grind. I'm sure Dame will get one when he's 45 years old. Right. Okay, so we've wiped down all those. I'll go with another guy that I actually did watch. We could go back to the late career star stuff, but I'll save that one for a little bit later. I have one more guy on there, but I'm going to go with Fred VanVleet from last year.
Okay.
And here's the thing. Fred's stats are fine. And if you remember correctly, Toronto didn't have fans for the first half of last season.
Yep.
And Fred shot like 52% when he was at home or something insane. Ben Taylor did a video on it. I was like, Fred VanVleet's really good. Like, he deserved to make the All-Star team. And then I had Turn on, and Turn was like, don't you remember, like, he hit like a ton of threes when they had no fans in the stadium, and his home and road splits were like crazy shooting wise. And he had, like, by the All-Star break had come around, he had even regressed a little bit. And like, look, I know that he shoots efficient shots because he shoots a ton of threes. He shoots 9 threes per game or whatever. But also, that was the only season in his career, because this is like outlier shit. Like, I have a few guys as outliers, and like Fred VanVleet is an outlier in terms of All-Star. Like, shooting 40% from three in his career since he's made his like leap or whatever. He shot 38% from the field, 40% from the field, 39% from the field, and shot very well from three that year, but most of it was weighted in that first half of the season. Another thing about these per game stats is that when Nick Nurse plays you fucking 40 minutes per game, your per game stats are going to look a little bit better. In his career, he still has not had a 20 points per game per 36 minutes because he just plays more minutes. It looks like he averages more, but it's really just he's playing a ton of minutes in these games. And Fred VanVleet, once again, very good player, very deserving of, some recognition, but small guard, I know he's better defensively than most small guards, but like small guard who's not like a hyper efficient scorer, okay playmaker, not a great one, can't finish around the rim. Like, I think that selection in history, when we look back, and we're putting him in an era of talent that is so fucking talented, that is so like, wow, these guys really jump off the screen with like James Harden missed the All-Star team this year.
Yeah.
And like, that's why I had Fred VanVleet on here for last year, because we're just in a talent boom right now, and it feels like I would be shocked if Fred VanVleet made another All-Star team in his career.
Yeah, I don't think it's gonna happen. Like, I mean, he's just like not that good. You know what I'm saying? Like
he's good. He's not great.
Yeah, I don't know. He was like, because he did make the All-Star team. Like, I think people forget, like, and he has gotten better in his career, but like, he was like the sixth guy on a championship team. He was not a starter, and I think that is like kind of for a reason. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't think he can be like a, ultra effective guard at like the highest level, I guess is just what I'll say. So I was kind of debating. I have a couple of options now. I've gone a couple of different ways. I'm going to go full hater mode, and I'm going to single out. This is kind of a fun one because this guy made All-Star games after this that he deserved. He made All-Star games before this that he deserved. But he is like the ultimate, like the definition of mid when it comes to All-Stars. And he had 1 year when he didn't, like, should not have made the All-Star team. So this, my friends, is our guy, Joe Johnson. And I want to direct everyone to the 2010-2011 Atlanta Hawks. This was his second to last year in Atlanta. He, like, honestly was like pretty in line with like all of his career stats. And he's always been the kind of all-star where he's like on the fringes anyway. But then he also shot like 29% from three that year and like still made it. And you know what? Maybe again, I think
you're going full hater because the Celtics traded him.
This is not why. No.
I was gonna say by that time, I guess you guys had won a title. So
yeah, I was gonna say I wasn't as like worried about it, but like, 10-11. This was 2 years after the title. So, but I guess just my thing with like Joe Johnson is he is like so boring that like this one reeks of again the East being bad and like people just kind of it's not as egregious as some of these other ones I've talked about, but like. There are other guys still on the board I really wanted to put ahead of him, like the Russ Houston season, like the Andrew Wiggins Golden State season. I couldn't get there. This is just a worse all-star case than either of those guys, who like both did pretty good, but I like remember those ones being like more Mickey Mouse. But then I went back and I like looked at the results and I was like, damn, we really were just putting like Joe Johnson in every year for like no reason because there was just no shooting guards in the East.
Yes, that was it. It was definitely just a lack of real talent, and he was a name that had made all-star teams that deserved it. It would basically be like if Trae Young got in this year again, even though he's having like a down year for him, because he has made all-star teams that he's deserved in the past. He's been one of the 20 best players or whatever. Like, I don't know. Who was it you were saying? Okay, so you said... Yeah, I don't know. I kind of look at didn't Joe Johnson make 7 all-star teams in his career?
7. Maybe really more. Let me count them up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah.
Wow.
And this was his 5th one. He made 2 more after this. One in Atlanta and another one in Brooklyn. Like, so it's just weird to see that, like, where he takes a noticeable dip. He's a fringe guy anyway.
Yeah.
And he still makes it just because, like, the East. Anyway, that's like the definition of Mickey Mouse, you know?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
He really has the talent. Again, probably a pretty similarly talented player to Jaylen Brown. And again, like we talked about, like 4. Are we sure Jalen's going to get 4 All-Stars? I'm not. Like,
probably something around that. Yeah. I was going to say in a different era, he probably makes more all-star games, but in this era with the amount of guards and wings and all that shit. Oh, you said Andrew Wiggins and Russ. The Russ one is an interesting one because Russ really popped off after the All-Star break. It was like he had that crazy run. Yeah. I believe it was the month before the All-Star break up through March when the league shut down was really where he popped off. So I think the Russ thing was more like he was getting it based on his name. Yeah, and then the Wiggins.
I remember that. Like, I remember being like, what, Russ made it? Like, Russ made it? Like, and I was indignant for some reason. I can't remember. And I looked at it and I looked at the stats over that year. I was like, no.
Oh, no, he was like insane after they traded Clint Capella and got Robert Covington. And they did the 5-out experiment. He averaged like 32 points a game for a month. In like February, it was like January, February, some shit. And that really was what made his stats look fucking crazy from that season. And when Russ was really good, he always had that, once again, middle of the season, no one really cares. Russ is going to show up and he's going to care and he's going to put up some fucking points. And that's what he was doing really. And I remember because everyone was praising Daryl Morey for being like a genius and being like, let's go 5-out. And then got to the playoffs and they couldn't stop Anthony Davis or get a rebound. Like it was like really tough in that Lakers Rockets series. Also Russ was really terrible in that series, but so the Andrew Wiggins one, I had it down for consideration. That's another one where it's going to be hindsight bias where people say, well, he was the second best player on a title team or third best player on a title team that year. So like, how could you possibly look at this? But like up until that point, he did not deserve the All-Star nod. Yeah. Like that he really shined in the second half of that season into the playoffs. And at the time should not have made the All-Star team, but the Western Conference is just weak for wings. And he was on Golden State, and they were really good, and they had the K-pop vote. So
there was he literally made it because like what was it, BTS or something?
Yeah. They had thing. Yeah. So there was that as well. By the way, if you want to pick again, I think that I picked 2 in a row because I did Dirk and then I did Fred VanVleet. So
okay.
So if you want to pick another one, you can pick another one, and then
how many do I have left? 2, 1.
Right now this is pick 17, so we're gonna do 24. So I think you've picked
2 left.
Okay.
Are we 24? Okay.
We're doing 12 each, or you want to do 10 each?
I'm starting to run a little light.
Okay, all right, yeah.
I'm gonna start being really mean to like guys who like we had a lot of overlap. Like,
yeah, of course.
Boy, fuck. Yeah. All right. I will go. Let me go back to my spreadsheet here and see because I have to scroll down here a little bit. I did.
I just went to check the scores of NBA games and then I realized it's All-Star break.
Oh no.
Sad.
Very sad. Okay. Let me go to. I had this one down for consideration, but again, I don't remember it that well. But it was like, so I don't know. Just statistically, and I know he was better a lot later on, but the first year Jermaine O'Neal made the All-Star team with the Pacers.
Yeah.
01, 02. Again, I think this is one of those things where it goes back to like what you were saying earlier about like
guys who made it a little too early.
Yeah, well, and just like the Shaq thing too. Like I'm sure he like played good defense on Shaq. Like
and they were both last name was O'Neal. I don't even think he was a center. I think he was a power forward.
He was a power forward.
Yeah. I was gonna say
he played center. He played center his first year in Indiana, but then they made him power forward the next year, and that was when he started making All-Star teams. But again, like just all the stats are like pretty bad. Like that's like a season that like no matter how I cut the pie, like came up again, like over and over and over again. Like is like this is one of the worst seasons like a guy who made this team has ever had. But I just I don't remember. Like I was a baby. I was not paying attention to.
You were a baby in 2001, weren't you? Like 12?
Yeah, I was a baby. I had I developed 12-year-old baby. Late. I developed very late. I had boss baby disease. Dressing in suits. I was very. If I had real gumption, I would have said 17, 18 Clay here, but I'll leave it alone.
All right, so put that one aside for a second.
Okay.
The Jermaine O'Neal season wasn't that bad when you consider the dead ball era shit.
Yeah.
Like the dead ball era was really tough. Like that was like the peak of the dead ball era, if I remember correctly. 01, 02. Yeah. We averaged 19 and 10. If I remember correctly, Jermaine O'Neal was a pretty good defender. He was like really athletic. Was. Yeah.
He was, especially like later on, like the 04 Pistons teams. Sure. I just don't. I think the 01, like the 2000, like 01 was like a little bit different. Like it was like a little more empty stats and stuff.
Well, he had an interesting career because he was one of those guys that was really decorated coming out, but he was a high school guy. So Portland took him, and then he just didn't work out there. And those Portland teams were still pretty decent, if I remember correctly.
That was the Jailblazers, right? Like
that was what though they were like
Jack Randolph and everything,
fucking loaded. Like Jermaine O'Neal was like their 13th guy. Like if you look back at some of those teams, like they had like Sabonis, Pippen. That was
young Rashid, I think.
Bonzi Wells, Steve Smith. Like they had. Their 1 through like 10 was like crazy. Like once again, Jermaine O'Neal obviously was very young at the time, but he was like the 13th man, like the 12th man or some shit. Like he didn't play at all for them really. We played like 10 minutes a game. And they had and then it didn't really work out there. So he got traded to Indiana and then he broke out. Yeah, he broke out his age 23 season, which was that year. So, but yeah, no, really good career, but that might have been a little bit too early.
Dude, I forgot they had Detlef Schrempf.
That team. I think that team was like, I don't even know how that happened. Like, how did they get so many good players with the salary cap? Like, I don't know.
Steve Smith, Scottie Pippen, Damon Stoudemire, Detlef Schrempf, Sabonis. Yeah.
They had like
even like Brian Grant is like a good player. Like Greg Anthony.
Brian Grant was famously in one of the Shaq trades. Yeah.
Bonzi Wells was on that team.
That's what I said. Yeah. Like that team was like deep as fuck, dude. Like that's why they almost beat the Lakers. They were the only team to push the Lakers in those years.
They won 59 games that year. Like
that they were incredible, dude. But yeah. So that was one of the first years of basketball that I like vaguely remember. They were really good. But Pippen's still one of the most historically underrated players. It's crazy. Yeah. All right. So You went Jermaine O'Neal there. I have a list of guys. I might have to start dipping into my older guys here. We'll before we get into that, I'll just go with another wash guy, and I'll go with Yao Ming. Yao Ming's last year, he did not deserve to make the All-Star team. It was all fan vote. He was cooked. He didn't even get to play in the game because he was injured so much that year.
Yeah.
He was not nearly as effective. It was the last year that he ever played. He didn't even play the year before due to injury. He averaged 10 points a game in 5 games and made the All-Star team.
That's tough.
Yeah. So Yao Ming, I'll put him. That was 2011, which was his last year in the NBA. Amazing player. And once again, probably the second best center in the NBA if you don't count Tim Duncan as a center for that stretch, especially post Shaq was like really, really good. And post Shaq peak, I should say, was really, really good and went toe to toe with Shaq, and incredibly skilled player who definitely deserved to make as many All-Star teams as he did early in his career. He was really, I remember when he came into the league because it was like such a huge deal that a Chinese player went number 1 overall. And if I remember correctly, I think he might have been one of the first, if not the first Chinese player drafted in general.
I think so,
yeah. And he was really, really incredible. Like he didn't, he was 22 as a rookie, which I totally forgot. I thought he was younger. But he retired by 30 because of the injuries. But the peak of his career in that mid-2000s team with him and Tracy McGrady, whenever they actually could stay on the court together, they were fucking awesome. It's unfortunate that injuries derailed both of their careers. But if you want to make a pick, you can. If not, I have other picks.
No, I will make a pick. I probably should have picked this guy above Jermaine O'Neal. I'm refining my spreadsheet here. So Antonio,
you're such a calculator boy.
I know. Antonio Davis.
Yeah, I had him on my list. Yeah. That's one of the more bizarre selections ever.
Really weird.
Yeah,
he averaged 13 and 11 this year. Like, again, I like you said, dead ball era, but like shot like 43% from the field again as a center. Like, it's blowing my mind that like centers were like shooting like guards do these days. Like,
I know.
All-star teams, like, I guess it was just like really like a different sport, but like crazy.
The spacing was so bad. It was like everyone just like hung around the rim and the paint basically. So like it was just much harder to score. That Toronto team, if I remember correctly, was really good. That's probably why he made it.
Yeah.
That was the year that they took the Sixers to 7 in the playoffs. But they still only had like 47 wins. Like they weren't that good. Like they were good, but like the East was a little bit weak back then. Yeah. And I think that's why he made it. He was one of the more bizarre selections because I remember that playoffs, and I remember as a kid, keep in mind, I remember thinking that Curry was their second best player. Del Curry, because Curry had some really big shots in that Sixers Raptors series. And then Antonio Davis was the second All-Star from that team for some reason, obviously behind Vince Carter. But they had a few guys on that team that I thought were better than him, if I remember correctly. There were like I'm just scrolling through right now, and like Muggsy Bogues was on that team. Wow. But yeah, Del Curry, a later age Charles Oakley, Mo Peterson. Like they had some guys on that team. Like it was kind of strange that Antonio Davis was the second All-Star from that team. But yeah, that was 2001, I believe. Yeah. Really strange selection. So if we're going way back, I had him on my list. I can also just do Mehmet Okur, who made the All-Star team one year.
What? What is that?
He in 2007 for the Jazz. He had a random
What?
I know. Look it up. Mehmet Okur made the All-Star team in 2007.
How did I miss that? I thought I was doing so good with my Chris Kaman poll. Damn.
No, that was a good one. But Mehmet Okur, were Chris Kaman and Mehmet Okur the same All-Star game? 2007.
No, it was 2 years later. He was
okay. I was gonna say that would have been holy really shit. Bad, yeah. Jesus Christ. Because Shaq made a few later in his career where you're like, yeah, he was kind of cooked by that point, but he was Shaq, so like obviously he's gonna get the All-Star selections. But yeah. Mehmet Okur made it.
That's insane, dude.
A fun fact, Mehmet Okur had the same amount of All-Star games in his career for the Utah Jazz as Andrei Kirilenko.
Listen to this, okay? He was named to the Western Conference All-Star 2007 All-Star game when he and Ray Allen were selected as replacements for Allen Iverson and Steve Nash. Talk about the clown in the SWAT team fucking like list. It's like 3 first ballot Hall of Famers in Mehmet Okur.
Incredible. Absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
Mehmet Okur, who totally forgot that he ended his career with the Jazz. He played for them for a while.
Yeah.
I remember him from those Pistons teams as a backup. He was, because they had Mehmet Okur and then Darko, who never played, coming off the bench. And I was surprised. I do vaguely remember that because I remember playing with him in like NBA Live or some shit, and he was an all-star one year. And I was like, he just never felt like an all-star in any capacity to me. So I can make 4 picks if you don't have anyone left, because I have a few guys left if you want me to make a few.
That was throwing me for a loop because I remember one of my friends was a huge Nets fan. And I remember him talking about the Okur contract. Yeah. And I was like, that just blew my mind. I have one more. Sadly, I didn't want to do this. I was hoping to run out of people before I had to do this. I'm very sad about this. My beautiful guy in 0203, Antoine Walker.
Antoine Walker, wow, yeah.
I didn't want to, like, I'm Blade crying with the gun, like me right now. I'm very sad. I love Twan. Dealt with a lot of the same like racist media stuff that like Allen Iverson did.
Yeah.
Also, just not a good player in like 0203. Like he's like a good young guy, but just like at that point was like really hampering like Paul Pierce. It was like clearly Paul Pierce's team. Like just was like the ultimate empty stats guy. I think he shot like 38% like as a power forward, which is like just yikes, like 31% from 3, and he took a lot of them for back then.
Well, you forgot this, and we're going all the way back to the first pick, but Kobe shot 35% in 2016 from the field.
Oh yeah, I mean, like Kobe is the
but yeah. Antoine Walker. Didn't you guys beat us in the playoffs this year? I feel like that Antoine Walker maybe was the year before.
0203. So
yeah,
I don't know. I can't remember like exactly what.
Yeah, I think you guys beat us in the playoffs that year with Antoine Walker and Paul Pierce.
Twan was taking 9.5 threes per 100 possessions.
That's a lot for back then.
0203.
That's unheard of.
That's what I'm saying. He was really gunning it.
Yeah.
And like missed a shitload, but like he made the All-Star team the year before on like way better stats.
Yeah, that maybe was the year that you guys beat us.
Yeah, he was shooting 34% from 3 that time. Then that just dipped to 32, and I just remember like watching it and being like, "Oh my fucking god, this is unbearable." Because like he was like looking off Paul Pierce to take these fucking threes.
How many? Would he make 2 All-Star teams in his career?
3. He made 97, 98. He made it as like
early, a young
in the league. Yeah,
gotcha.
Yeah, and then like they drafted, I think they drafted, who was Pierce, 98 or 99, something like that. And then like that was like when the teams were getting good, he started getting those later All-Star selections because that was like the Celtics teams, like the Pierce Walker Celtics teams that actually like made the playoffs.
Competed. Yeah, I was gonna say you guys got to the second round and shit. Yeah. Okay, so Antoine Walker, who actually ended up going on he had a little bit of a career revitalization with the Heat a few years later.
Yeah.
And ended up winning a title with them, which that Heat team is still one of the more confusing title teams ever. It was basically like Wade, half of Shaq, and a bunch of guys. Like it was just like a bunch of role players.
Almost like there was like a third party that like imposed their will on that finals in some way. It was almost like there was like some sort of I don't know authority figure sort of called in
a referee, if you will,
referee of some kind. Yeah, sort of an impartial third party at the game. I don't know who that would be.
A man from Delaware County.
By the way,
Mr. Donaghy.
Shout out to Stern. They were the video of him asking Jim Rome if he still beats his wife was
incredible. It's going viral again, and I'm like, he was just like, "Hey, by the way, do you still beat your wife?" And then Jim Rome. My favorite part about that was we were talking about it in the Discord yesterday. Someone goes, he doesn't even deny it. He just goes, "That's not fair." Jim Rome's just like, "It's not fair that you asked if I beat my wife when I clearly did."
Well, and it's like a good thing because before that he's asking if the lottery is rigged, which like is like such an insane question.
Right.
And so it just comes back to him with like
as if he would even answer honestly. Like,
yeah, exactly. Jim Rome was such a the
little
thing about
shithead.
him getting his ass beat for who's he saying that to? Chris?
Jim, and he kept calling him Chris. Yeah,
because Kramer or
it was a quarterback.
Chris something was a female tennis star, and which that was like very funny back to Jim Rome back in those days.
Sure, of course, because he's a fucking douchebag.
Yeah, and he got the shit beat out of it. But anyway, shout out to Stern. Evil monster sometimes, but also he would have vetoed the Chris Paul trade. So
Jim Everett,
yeah, Chris Everett was the female tennis star. So
cool, what a dickhead.
Yeah.
Oh my god. Yeah, he was a quarterback, played 12 years in the NFL. Yeah, so incredible.
Shout out to Stern, by the way. R.I.P.
Yeah, R.I.P. to the big homie.
Yeah.
So we're getting down to the end here. I'm just going to run through a bunch of guys. We don't have to pick anymore, but I'm going to run through a few guys. AC Green, who made it in 1990, was the fourth best player on the Lakers team that made it to the finals that year. Somehow had more votes than another controversial favorite that has been going around recently, Karl Malone, had more votes than him in the All-Star game that year. Shout out to Karl Malone, who is a disgusting human being and should not be allowed to represent the NBA in any capacity. It is funny because we were talking about this with the Karl Malone thing. It's kind of like the Philadelphia fans have actually known about the Karl Malone thing for way longer than most, because his son, Demetrius Bell, who he impregnated a teenager at the time, his son played for the Philadelphia Eagles. He was he was an offensive tackle for us, and he was like out of the league really quickly, but everyone was like, oh, that's Karl Malone's son who he doesn't recognize. And I'm like, why doesn't he recognize his own son? And then we found out why.
Why? Everyone's like doing math.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Oh, she was 13. Great.
Awesome.
So yeah. So that was something that we have known about for a while. So fuck Karl Malone forever. He was already a loser, and it's great to see that everyone has now realized how big of a loser he truly was.
Yeah.
Another
I think of the Rodman. Well, I think it was Rodman, like in the Bulls Jazz, went up to him, or maybe it was Pippen, said the mailman doesn't deliver on Sundays. And then free throws. So we all thought that was because it was a good burn, but it was because Karl Malone is actually Satan, and Sunday is a holy day, and he's not allowed to be out in the world.
That's absolutely right. That's right. Okay, so I have a few other guys here that really did not deserve to make the All-Star team. Chris Gatling. My cousin used to hang out with Chris Gatling in Miami, and that's the only reason I knew who this person was. He was a 96-97 All-Star. He was traded halfway through the season from the Nets. Funny enough, an All-Star was traded after he was traded from the Mavs to the Nets, in reverse of the Kyrie type thing. He basically had one good season, complete. He was a complete journeyman. Should not have made the All-Star team at all. He averaged like 17 points a game. BJ Armstrong in 1994, the year that Jordan was out of the league, the Bulls got 3 All-Stars. Horace Grant was another one, but Horace Grant actually kind of deserved it. BJ Armstrong averaged 14.8 points a game, shot 47% from the field. He was okay, but he had a negative BPM and was like not really that deserving of an All-Star. Not at all that year. He comes up a lot on these kind of lists. And then two other guys I just wanted to point out real quick before we get out of here. Jason Williams, not White Chocolate, the other one, the guy who murdered a person. He had in 1997, he had one really good season, and he was out of the NBA 2 years later, and then he murdered a guy. So he had a negative 2.8 BPM for his career, was not anything more than like a bench role player, and somehow made the All-Star team 1 year for the Nets. And then just the last guy I wanted to point out here, Sixers legend Dana Barros, and also played for the Celtics as well. Dana Barros in the mid-90s had an All-Star season. He only averaged more than 10 points a game 4 times in his entire career. This year, he averaged 20 points per game. He was a bench guard largely throughout all of his career, and one year had a really hot shooting season with the Sixers. He was a very good shooter. He averaged 20 points a game in this season, but he played 41 minutes per game in 1995. And he actually he shot 5.2 threes per game for 1995 was like unheard of. Yeah. So a little bit ahead of his time, and definitely an outlier in terms of the rest of his career. Did not even come close to making an all-star team in any other years in his career.
Wow. Our guy.
That's it.
Jeff Teague. This Teague. He beats the Bozo all-star team allegations.
That's absolutely right.
You've heard it here first. He deserved to make that all-star team.
Yep.
That was like the first thing I thought when you sent this to me. I was like, we are gonna get Jeff Teague's ass. And then I went and I looked at the thing. I was like, fuck, man. Like
he was good that year.
He was good. Like, and I remember him being an eye test guy. Like I thought he was like an eye test looks good, like Schroeder. Like I kind of remember him being like Dennis Schroeder, where like eye test, you're like, oh wow, like he's like kind of good. And then you look at the stats, and you're like, ooh, maybe not. But he was good that year. So shout out to Jeff Teague.
He did it, folks. He avoided the allegations. If I want to throw one last burn in here for former Sixers, Ben Simmons' last year was a little bit Mickey. Like his last year, real Sixers fans remember Ben Simmons playing like complete dog shit for the first month of the year, and everyone just blamed it on, Ben starts slow, and he was in trade rumors for Harden, and he was bad for like 2 months of that season. Ooh. Tobias Harris was much better for the first half of that season. It was the COVID-shortened season in 2021, and because the Sixers were the 1 seed and Ben was the more recognizable name, he got into the All-Star game over Tobias Harris and a few other guys that honestly had better arguments to make the All-Star team that year. So, Ben Simmons last year, they say he's a 3-time All-Star. He's more like a 2-time All-Star. So,
sorry, I'm calling the Cookies Hoops pod. Hello? Yeah, I got him. What do you want? What do you want me to do with him? We're taking him to the big house.
Look, I hope that they're enjoying this Ben season where he's falling in and out of the rotation. Former top 5 player Ben Simmons.
It's because he was traded. When has a player ever played well after being traded? Never.
That's a good point.
I'll answer your question. Never.
Very, very good point.
He went to a bad situation. He had to play with Kevin Durant. Do you have any idea how hard that is?
The mental drain of having to play off of Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving.
And now he's stuck on this team that has what? Like no wings or shooting? How is he supposed to succeed there?
Exactly. It's just not a perfect situation for Ben Simmons' game. Yeah. You need to build a perfect team around Ben Simmons' game, which would have like a ton of versatile wings. 4 Kevin Durants with Ben Simmons at the 4.
Do you have any idea how many titles a Ben Simmons team would win if they had 4 Kevin Durants on their team?
Let's make it happen. Clone Kevin Durant.
Clone Kevin.
Send him back to Brooklyn. 3 times. We need 3 more Kevin Durants. That's incredible. God. All right. So, I'm going to choose Ben Simmons 2021 as my last one because his stats don't look that bad, but he was dog shit to start the year and really didn't turn it around until the joke that year for Sixers fans was Ben really doesn't care until he knows that it's time to vote for the All-Star game. And then he tries for a month, boosts his stats, and then he stops trying again. So, shout out to Ben. All right, 2 hours and 22 minutes. I thought we were going to go this long, but it always seems to amaze me. Anything else you want to say, Sam?
Nope. I mean, this is what we do. We're vamping. I know you, the slops. I know you slop hogs love it when we take a giant tangent. To just this really, somebody said it. It really is like the podcast of just naming guys. Where you and I just get into like,
that was this entire episode. Chris Kaman.
Naming guys. This is the Naming Guys podcast delivered.
Well, welcome back to Names, baby. We're gonna name guys. Let's go.
Names podcast.
All right, let's get out of here. Peace.